Some debts can't be paid in money. When Victoria Hale appeared at Ethan Cole's door after 20 years of silence, she didn't come for apologies or explanations. She came to collect on a promise made when they were young and stupid enough to believe love could survive anything. What Ethan didn't know was that she'd been lied to. What Victoria didn't know was that her father's dying confession would change everything they thought they understood about the night their world fell apart. This is a story about second chances, bitter truths, and the kind of love that refuses to stay buried. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stick around until the end. Because what starts with a knock in the snow ends with something neither of them saw coming. The knock came at 7:43 on a Thursday night in February, sharp enough to make Ethan's daughter look up from her math homework. "You expecting someone?" Maya asked, her pencil hovering over a half-finished equation. Ethan shook his head. He wasn't expecting anyone. He never was. His life had become predictable in the way lives do when you stop fighting against the current and just let it carry you. Work, Maya, dinner, homework, sleep, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was safe. And safe had become more valuable than exciting somewhere around the time he'd found himself changing diapers alone at 2 a.m. while his wife's funeral program sat on the kitchen counter. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "I'll get it," Ethan said, pushing back from the table. His knee popped, 32 going on 50. And Maya smirked. "You sound like Grandpa." "Watch it, kid." The apartment was small enough that 6 steps took him from the kitchen table to the front door. He could see a shape through the frosted glass, backlit by the hallway's fluorescent buzz. Tall. Still. Waiting. Ethan turned the deadbolt and pulled the door open. For a moment he forgot how to breathe. She stood in the hallway like something out of a memory he'd spent years trying to forget. Tall and precise in a charcoal coat that probably cost more than his car. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that made her cheekbones sharper, her eyes colder. But it was her. Older, yes. Harder around the edges, definitely, but unmistakably her. "Hello, Ethan." Victoria Hale's voice was exactly the same, low and steady, with that slight rasp she used to get when she was nervous, though you'd never know it from looking at her face. "Vicky." The name came out without permission, sounding wrong in his mouth after all this time. Nobody called her that anymore. He'd read about her in business magazines at the dentist's office. Victoria Hale, CEO. Victoria Hale, youngest board chair in the company's history. Victoria Hale, worth more money than he could comprehend. Not Vicky. Never Vicky. "It's been a long time," she said. 20 years. 19 and a half, actually. Of course she'd know exactly. Victoria always knew exactly. They stood there in the doorway, the heat from his apartment leaking out into the cold hallway, neither of them quite willing to move first. Ethan was aware of Maya behind him, probably staring, definitely listening. He should invite Victoria in. He should slam the door. He should do something other than stand there like an idiot, but his brain had apparently decided to take a vacation. "Can I come in?" Victoria asked. "I don't think that's a good idea." "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." "Dad?" Maya's voice cut through the tension. "Who is it?" Ethan glanced back. Maya had abandoned her homework and was standing now, curiosity written all over her 11-year-old face. She had her mother's eyes, but his stubborn chin, and right now that chin was set in a way that meant she wasn't going to let this go. "An old friend," Ethan said, which felt like both a lie and the truth at the same time. "You don't have old friends," Maya pointed out, brutally accurate as always. "You barely have new friends." Maya, "It's fine." Victoria's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "She's not wrong." Something about hearing Victoria acknowledge Maya's existence made it real in a way it hadn't been 5 seconds ago. 2 parts of his life that should never have touched were suddenly in the same room, and Ethan felt like the floor was tilting under his feet. 5 minutes, he said, stepping back. That's all. Victoria walked past him into the apartment, and Ethan caught the scent of her perfume, different from what she used to wear, something expensive and impersonal. She looked around the living room with an expression he couldn't quite read. Taking inventory, maybe. Judging the worn couch, the stack of Maya's library books on the coffee table, the TV that was 3 generations out of date. Nice place, Victoria said, and Ethan couldn't tell if she meant it. It's home. He closed the door, suddenly self-conscious about the dishes in the sink, the laundry basket by the couch, all the small evidences of a life lived without anyone to impress. Maya, this is Victoria. Victoria, my daughter, Maya. Hi, Maya said, with the careful politeness she used on adults she didn't quite trust. Hello. Victoria nodded at her, not quite smiling. I like your shirt. Maya looked down at her faded NASA t-shirt like she'd forgotten what she was wearing. Thanks. I want to be an astronaut. That's ambitious. Dad says if I'm going to dream, I might as well dream big. Smart dad. Ethan cleared his throat. Maya, why don't you finish your homework in your room? But, room, now. Maya shot him a look that promised this conversation wasn't over, grabbed her textbook, and disappeared down the short hallway. Her door didn't quite slam, but it closed with enough force to make a point. Silence dropped between them like a weight. She seems like a good kid, Victoria said. She is. Ethan crossed his arms, a defensive posture he couldn't quite help. You didn't come here to talk about Maya. No. Victoria's composure cracked just slightly, a hairline fracture in the mask. I came because my father is dying. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Richard Hale. He hadn't thought about that name in years, had trained himself not to. I'm sorry. Don't be. Victoria's voice was flat. He's not a good man. He never was. Then why are you here? Because he asked me to find you. Before he dies, he wants to see you. Ethan laughed, a short, bitter sound. No. Ethan, no, absolutely not. He moved toward the door, ready to open it, to end this. I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not interested. You walked away 20 years ago. You made your choice. I didn't. Victoria stopped, her jaw tight. It's more complicated than that. It really isn't. You picked money over me. End of story. Is that what you think happened? It's what I know happened. You stopped answering my letters. You wouldn't take my calls. And then I saw you in some magazine getting engaged to, what's his name, the hedge fund guy, and that was pretty clear. I married him, Victoria said quietly, and divorced him 3 years later, but that's not… Ethan, I never got your letters. The words hung in the air between them. What? Your letters, the ones you supposedly sent after I left for school. I never received them, not one. Ethan stared at her. That's impossible. I sent 12 letters in 4 months. I poured my heart out like an idiot, and you never responded. Because I never got them. Victoria's hands were clenched at her sides now, her composure starting to crack in earnest. I waited. Every day I checked my mailbox, and nothing. I called your house, and your roommate said you'd moved, wouldn't give me a number. I thought you'd moved on. I thought I'd been some stupid summer fling you forgot about. You thought… Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. His mind was reeling, trying to reorganize 20 years of certainty into something that made sense with what she was saying. No, that's not… I loved you. Past tense, I noticed. What the hell do you expect? You disappeared. You were gone, and I was… He stopped himself before he said too much, before he admitted how thoroughly losing her had broken something in him that never quite healed right. It doesn't matter now. It matters to my father. Screw your father. Victoria flinched, and Ethan felt a savage satisfaction at getting through her armor, even for a second. He intercepted the letters, Victoria said, her voice low and controlled again. He admitted it to me 3 days ago. He had someone at the university mailroom pulling anything addressed to me from you. He's the one who told your roommate to say you'd moved. He orchestrated the whole thing. The floor really was tilting now. Ethan sat down hard on the arm of the couch, his legs suddenly unreliable. Why? Because you weren't good enough. Victoria said it matter-of-factly, like she was reading from a report. You were working class. No family money, no connections, no prospects that he considered worth his daughter's time. He wanted me to marry into the right circles, build the right alliances. He thought he was protecting me from making a mistake. Jesus Christ. He's dying now. Pancreatic cancer. They give him weeks, maybe a month, and apparently facing death has given him something resembling a conscience because he wants to confess. To both of us. Together. Ethan put his head in his hands. This was too much. 20 minutes ago, his biggest problem was helping Maya understand pre-algebra, and now the entire foundation of his past was crumbling. I can't, he said. Ethan, I can't. I built a life. I moved on. I got married, had Maya, lost my wife. I've had enough grief. I don't need to go digging up more. He's dying. Good. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. I understand if you hate him. I'm not far from hating him myself. But I need to know. I need to hear him say it, see his face when he admits what he did. And he won't talk unless you're there. Those were his terms. Manipulating people until the very end. Classic Richard Hale. Yes. Victoria's smile was sharp and sad. He's nothing if not consistent. Ethan looked up at her. In the apartment's warm light, he could see the girl he'd loved underneath the polished CEO exterior. She was still there, under all the armor, still the same person who used to steal his jacket and laugh at his terrible jokes and kiss him like the world was ending, or maybe he was just seeing what he wanted to see. I don't know, he said. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. I'll take it. Victoria reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a business card, heavy stock with embossed lettering. She set it on the coffee table. That's my private number. Call me when you decide, but don't take too long. We don't have much time. She moved toward the door, and Ethan found himself standing, following her, not quite ready for her to leave, even though he'd been desperate for her to go 30 seconds ago. Why now? He asked. Why not just let me think you abandoned me? Why come here and blow up my life? Victoria turned back, her hand on the doorknob. Because he doesn't get to die with his lies intact. And because you deserve to know the truth, even if it's 20 years too late. The truth doesn't change anything, doesn't it? She left before he could answer, the door clicking shut behind her with a soft finality. Ethan stood there in the sudden silence, staring at the business card on his coffee table like it might explode. His heart was hammering, his hand shaking slightly. He felt like he'd been hit by a truck. She's pretty. He jumped. Maya had emerged from her room, silent as a cat. I thought I told you to do your homework. I finished it. A lie, probably, but he didn't have the energy to call her on it. So who is she really? Ethan sighed and sat back down on the couch. Maya immediately climbed up next to him, tucking herself under his arm the way she used to when she was smaller. She was getting too big for it now, all elbows and knees, but he didn't have the heart to tell her to stop. Someone I knew a long time ago, he said finally. Someone you loved? Kids. They saw everything. Yeah, someone I loved. Before Mom? Long before Mom. Maya was quiet, processing. What happened? We were young. It didn't work out. But she's here now. Just for a visit. She didn't look like she was just visiting. She looked like she had something important to say. Ethan pulled Maya closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't notice because you're old. I'm 32. Like I said, old. He laughed despite himself, and Maya grinned, pleased with herself. They sat there for a while, not talking, just existing together in the warm bubble of their little apartment. Outside, the February wind rattled the windows. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Dad? Maya's voice was smaller now, uncertain. Yeah? If something was important, even if it was scary or hard, you'd do it anyway, right? Because that's what you always tell me. Do the hard thing. Ethan closed his eyes. Out of the mouths of babes. Sometimes the hard thing is knowing when to let go, he said. Or maybe the hard thing is knowing when not to. Us dads. She wriggled out from under his arm and stood up, suddenly all business. I'm actually not done with my homework. I just wanted to meet her. She seems nice. Sad, but nice. Sad? Yeah, like she's pretending really hard that she's fine. Maya shrugged. Anyway, if she comes back, you should be nicer to her. I was nice. You were doing that thing where you cross your arms and pretend you don't care. It's not nice. It's scared. I wasn't, but Maya was already gone, back to her room, leaving Ethan alone with the business card and the wreckage of his carefully reconstructed life. He picked up the card. Victoria Hale, Chief Executive Officer. A phone number with too many digits, the kind of number that went to assistants and secretaries and people whose job was to keep the rabble away from important people, except she'd said it was her private number. He turned the card over. On the back, in handwriting he remembered from birthday cards and love notes, she'd written, "I'm sorry for everything." Ethan set the card down and put his head in his hands. He didn't sleep that night. At midnight, he was still on the couch, the TV playing some late-night talk show he wasn't watching. His mind kept circling back to the same questions, like a dog worrying a bone. What if she was telling the truth? What if Richard Hale really had intercepted the letters, manipulated both of them, destroyed what they had for his own purposes? And if that was true, what did it change? Everything. Nothing. He didn't know. At 1 a.m., he got up and dug through the closet in his bedroom, pushing past winter coats and boxes of Maya's old toys until he found what he was looking for. A shoebox held shut with a rubber band, shoved in the back corner where he wouldn't have to look at it. He carried it back to the living room and opened it. Letters. Dozens of them, still in their envelopes. The ones he'd written and never sent after the first 12 went unanswered. He'd kept writing for months, pouring out his hurt and confusion and anger onto paper, sealing them up, addressing them, and then keeping them because what was the point? She wasn't going to respond. She'd made her choice. Underneath the letters were photos. Victoria at 19 laughing at something off camera, her hair wild in the wind. Victoria and Ethan together, his arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning like idiots. Victoria asleep in his bed, the morning light making her skin glow. He'd loved her so much it had felt like a physical thing, a presence in his chest that made it hard to breathe sometimes. And when she left, when the silence stretched from days to weeks to months, that love had curdled into something bitter and hard. He told himself he was over it. He'd met Sarah, fallen in a different kind of love, built a different kind of life. When Sarah got sick, when the cancer took her piece by piece over 18 brutal months, Victoria Hale had been the furthest thing from his mind. He'd had real problems, real grief, real life. But now here it was again, dragged back into the light. And the worst part was that he could feel it stirring, that old feeling. Not love, he wasn't that stupid, but something, recognition maybe. Or just the ghost of what used to be. At 2 a.m. he picked up his phone. Put it down. Picked it up again. Victoria answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the hour. Ethan. Did I wake you? No, I don't sleep much these days. He could hear something in the background, papers rustling, maybe a keyboard clicking. Still working at 2 in the morning, some things never changed. I want to know everything, he said. Before I agree to anything, I need to hear the whole story. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Now? Why not? Neither of us is sleeping. A soft laugh, tired and genuine. No, I suppose not. Okay, where do you want me to start? The beginning, the real beginning. So she told him. She told him about coming home from college that first summer, about being dragged to some charity function at her father's insistence, about being bored out of her mind until she'd sneaked out to the garden for air and found him there, the caterer's assistant, smoking a cigarette he'd bummed from one of the waiters. You look so out of place, she said, like you'd rather be anywhere else. I hated those events. Rich people pretending to care about poor people while eating $50 appetizers. I know, you told me, about 30 seconds after I introduced myself. Ethan smiled despite himself. I was an asshole. You were honest. It was refreshing. He could hear the smile in her voice, too. And then you offered me a cigarette even though I'd never smoked in my life. And I took it because I didn't want you to think I was some spoiled rich girl. You coughed for 10 minutes. It was dignified coughing. It really wasn't. They talked for an hour, trading memories, the rest of that summer, when Victoria had kept finding excuses to see him. The night they'd finally kissed, clumsy and perfect under the dock at the lake house. The way her father had looked at Ethan the one time they'd met, like he was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "I should have known then," Victoria said, her voice going flat. "The way he reacted when I told him about you. He smiled and nodded and said he was happy for me, but his eyes were calculating. He was already planning how to end it." "So what happened at the end of summer?" "He told me I needed to focus on school, that long-distance relationships were a distraction, that if what we had was real, it would survive me being away." She laughed, bitter. "Classic manipulation, making me think it was a test, that if I really loved you, I'd let you go to prove it. And the letters? He had connections everywhere, including the university. It wouldn't have been hard to arrange, and I was naive enough not to question why I wasn't hearing from you. I thought maybe he was right. Maybe it was just a summer thing. Until I came home for Thanksgiving and tried to find you, but you'd moved, and when I finally tracked down your old roommate, he told me you'd left town. Wouldn't say where. Said you wanted a clean break." Ethan closed his eyes. "I never said that. He barely knew me. We weren't friends." "I know that now. But at the time I believed him. And then my father introduced me to Bradley, the hedge fund guy, and he was so charming and age-appropriate and from the right family, and I thought, fine, if Ethan doesn't want me, I'll move on." "Did you love him?" "No, I tried, but no." They were both quiet for a long moment, the weight of 20 lost years sitting heavy between them. "I need to think," Ethan said finally. "I know, but I'll call you. Tomorrow. Or the next day." "Okay." Victoria paused. "Ethan, for what it's worth, I'm sorry for believing the lies, for not trying harder to find you. I could say the same thing. We were kids. We were old enough to know better. Maybe. Or maybe we were exactly stupid enough to be manipulated by someone who'd been doing it his whole life." After they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark living room, the shoebox of letters open on his lap, and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do now. He told Maya the next morning over breakfast. "So you're going?" she asked through a mouthful of cereal. "I don't know yet, but you're thinking about it." "I'm thinking about it." Maya swallowed, considering. "What's stopping you?" "A lot of things. It's complicated." "You always tell me complicated just means there's more than one right answer." "When did I say that?" "Last week, when I couldn't decide whether to try out for soccer or join the art club." "That's different. How?" Ethan didn't have a good answer for that, so he changed the subject. "You're going to be late for school." "Nice dodge, Dad. I learned from the best." She grinned and grabbed her backpack. At the door, she turned back. "You know what Mom used to say? About regrets?" Ethan's throat tightened. Maya didn't talk about Sarah often. When she did, it usually meant something. "What?" "She said the things we don't do hurt worse than the things we do. Because at least if you try and fail, you know. But if you never try, you just wonder forever." "Your mom was a smart woman." "She was." Maya's smile was sad and sweet. "So maybe listen to her." After she left, Ethan called in sick to work, the first time in 2 years, and spent the morning pacing his apartment like a caged animal. He made coffee, didn't drink it, made more, stared at Victoria's business card, put it down, picked it up again. At noon, he called. "I'll come," he said when she answered, "but I'm not doing it for your father. I'm doing it because you're right. I deserve to hear him say it." "Thank you." Victoria's relief was palpable even through the phone. "Can you come today, this afternoon? That fast?" "He's fading quickly. If we wait, we might miss our chance." "I need to arrange for Maya. Bring her." Ethan blinked. "What?" "Bring your daughter. The estate is big enough. There's plenty of room, and honestly, I'd like to meet her properly, not just awkward hallway introductions." "I don't think—" "Ethan, it's not a request. If you're coming, bring her. I insist." There was something in her voice, a firmness that reminded him of the girl who'd once convinced him to go skinny dipping in a lake that definitely had no trespassing signs. When Victoria decided something was happening, it generally happened. Fine, but if this goes sideways, It's already sideways. We're just trying to straighten it out. He picked Maya up from school early, ignoring her delighted surprise at the unexpected freedom. In the car, he explained where they were going. Sort of. So this guy, Victoria's dad, he's super rich and super dying, and he wants to apologize for being a dick 20 years ago. Maya's summary was blunt but accurate. Language. Sorry for being a jerk. Better. And yeah, basically. And you're going because I need closure. The word felt borrowed from a therapy session he'd never attended, but it was close enough to true. Closure's overrated, Maya said wisely. Mrs. Peterson says closure is just another word for giving up. Mrs. Peterson teaches 5th grade English. What does she know about closure? Her husband left her for their mailman. She knows about closure. Ethan shot her a look. How do you know that? Kids talk, Dad. We know everything. The Hale estate was an hour north of the city, tucked into the kind of countryside where trees outnumbered people and property lines were measured in acres instead of feet. Victoria had texted him the address and the gate code, and when they pulled up to the entrance, even knowing what to expect, Ethan felt his stomach drop. The gate was iron and imposing, set into a stone wall that stretched in both directions as far as he could see. Beyond it, a driveway curved through manicured grounds toward a house that looked more like a museum than a home. Holy shit, Maya breathed. Maya. Sorry, but come on. Look at this place. He couldn't argue. It was obscene in its wealth, the kind of casual display of money that made him think about how many people could be fed or housed or educated with what it cost to maintain the lawn. The gate swung open when he entered the code, silent and automatic. He drove through, feeling like he was entering another world. Maybe he was. Victoria was waiting on the front steps when they pulled up, still in business attire, but with her hair down now, softer somehow. She walked over as Ethan parked, and he saw Maya watching her with unconcealed curiosity. You came, Victoria said as they got out. I said I would. People say a lot of things. Her eyes flicked to Maya. Hello again. Hi. Maya stuck out her hand, formal and awkward. I'm Maya, officially this time. Victoria shook it, a small smile playing at her lips. Victoria, officially. Your house is insane. Maya, Ethan started, but Victoria laughed. It is insane. I've always thought so. She looked at Ethan. He's inside, upstairs. The nurse says he's having a good day, relatively speaking. How bad is it? Bad. He's on oxygen, can barely sit up, but his mind is still sharp. That's the curse of pancreatic cancer. It destroys your body but leaves your brain intact to watch. They walked toward the house together, Maya between them, and Ethan tried not to think about how strange this was. How wrong and right at the same time. The inside of the mansion was exactly what he'd expected. High ceilings, expensive art, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. But it felt cold, empty, despite all the stuff. Like a hotel where nobody actually lived. Victoria led them upstairs, down a hallway lined with family portraits. Ethan recognized a younger Richard Hale in some of them, always stern, always perfectly composed. Victoria appeared in the later ones, growing from a child to a teenager to a young woman, but always with the same careful expression, like she was posing for a stranger. He's in here, Victoria said, stopping outside a door. She looked at Maya. Maybe you should wait out here. This might be boring, Maya suggested. Don't worry, I brought a book. She pulled a worn paperback from her jacket pocket and plopped down on a bench in the hallway, already opening it. Victoria looked at Ethan, who shrugged. She's tougher than she looks. I can see that. They went in together. The room was large and airy, with windows overlooking the grounds. Medical equipment hummed quietly in one corner, oxygen tanks, monitors, machines Ethan didn't recognize. And in the center of it all, propped up in a hospital bed, was Richard Hale. He'd shrunk. That was Ethan's first thought. The man he remembered had been tall and imposing, with the kind of presence that made you stand straighter without meaning to. This version was a shadow, hollowed out by disease. His skin hanging loose on bones that looked too fragile to support even his diminished weight. But his eyes were the same. Sharp and calculating, missing nothing. Ethan Cole, Richard said, his voice a rasp. You came. I'm here. Thank you. He shifted slightly, and Ethan saw him wince. Victoria, dear, would you give us a moment? No. Victoria's voice was ice. Whatever you have to say, you say in front of both of us. Those were your terms, remember? We're both here, so talk. Richard's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Still headstrong. I learned from watching you. Fair enough? He turned his attention back to Ethan. I suppose there's no point in pleasantries. I'm dying, you're angry, and we both know why we're here. So I'll be direct. I destroyed your relationship with my daughter. Deliberately. Systematically. And I'm not sorry I did it, though I am sorry for the pain it caused. The sheer audacity of it hit Ethan like a slap. You're not sorry. No. At the time, I believed I was protecting Victoria from making a catastrophic mistake. You were nobody, no prospects, no connections, no future that didn't involve working yourself to death for scraps. I wanted better for her. You wanted control. Yes, that too. Richard didn't deny it. I built an empire from nothing. I learned early that if you don't control your circumstances, they control you, and I wasn't going to let some summer romance derail everything I'd planned for my daughter. She wasn't a chess piece. Wasn't she? We're all chess pieces in someone's game, Mr. Cole. The only question is whether you're moving yourself or letting someone else move you. Ethan felt his hands curl into fists. Beside him, Victoria was rigid, her face carefully blank. You're a monster, Ethan said quietly. Perhaps, but a monster who gave Victoria every advantage. The best schools, the best connections, the best opportunities. She's a success by any measure. Would that have happened if she'd thrown it all away for love? Maybe, maybe not, but it would have been her choice. And she was 19. 19-year-olds make terrible choices. So you made them for her. Yes. Richard's breathing was labored now, each word an effort. And I'd do it again. Because look at her. Look at what she's accomplished. President of the company by 30. More wealth and power than most people dream of. That's what my choices gave her. And what did they cost her? Ethan shot back. Did you ever think about that? What it cost her to spend 20 years thinking she wasn't worth fighting for? Richard's eyes flickered to Victoria, and for the first time, Ethan saw something like regret cross his face. I thought she'd forget you, he said quietly. Young love burns hot and fast. I assumed it would fade, that she'd move on, find someone appropriate, never look back. I didn't count on me actually loving her? Ethan finished. On her actually loving me? Yeah, that must have been inconvenient for your plans. Ethan. Victoria's voice was soft but firm. She turned to her father. You said you wanted to confess, so confess. Tell us how you did it. Richard sank back against his pillows, suddenly looking every one of his 73 years. The letters were easy. I had a contact at the university mailroom, paid him to pull anything addressed to Victoria from you. They're in my study, actually. All 12 of them. I kept them. Why? Insurance, initially, in case Victoria somehow found out and confronted me. I could produce them, pretend I'd been keeping them safe, claim they must have been lost in the mail. Silly, in retrospect. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Later, I kept them because they reminded me what I'd done, the lengths I'd gone to. I'm not a sentimental man, but even I need my trophies. Ethan felt sick. And my roommate? $500 and a story about you harassing Victoria, asking him to lie if she called. He was happy to help protect a poor girl from a stalker. Richard's smile was bitter. People are easy to manipulate when you give them a narrative that makes them the hero. You're unbelievable. I'm pragmatic. There's a difference. Victoria moved closer to the bed, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. And the rest of it? Bradley? Was that manipulated too? Not manipulated, facilitated. I introduced you, certainly. Made sure you spent time together. He was perfect. Good family, good prospects, malleable enough that I could maintain control through him. But you chose to marry him, Victoria. That was your decision. I chose him because I thought Ethan didn't want me. Victoria's composure finally cracked, her voice rising. Because you made me believe I wasn't worth loving. You were always worth loving. I just didn't want you loved by the wrong person. The room fell silent except for the hum of medical equipment and Richard's labored breathing. Ethan felt like he was underwater, everything distorted and slow. Why now? He asked finally. Why tell us now? Richard's laugh was a wheeze, like, because I'm dying and the dead can't control anything, and because Victoria deserves to know what was done to her, what I did to her. If there's such a thing as redemption, I suppose this is the closest I'll get. You think telling us makes it better? No, I think telling you makes it true. Right now, it's just my sin. Once you know, it becomes yours too. What you do with it, that's up to you. He looked at Victoria, and his eyes were suddenly wet. I loved you in my way. Terribly, selfishly, but I loved you. And I'm sorry. Not for what I did, but for what it cost you. That was never the plan. Victoria didn't respond. She just stood there, shaking slightly, and Ethan wanted to reach for her but didn't know if he had the right. The letters are in the bottom drawer of the desk in the study, Richard said. Take them. They're yours. And the rest, well, that's in the will. You'll understand when the time comes. I don't want anything from you, Victoria said. Too bad. You'll get it anyway. Another wet cough. Now get out, both of you. I'm tired, and you've heard what you came to hear. They left without another word, Victoria moving like a sleepwalker. In the hallway, Maya looked up from her book, took one look at their faces, and wisely said nothing. Downstairs, Victoria led them to the study, another room full of expensive everything, and pulled open the bottom desk drawer. Sure enough, there they were, 12 envelopes, addressed in Ethan's younger, messier handwriting, all unopened. Victoria picked them up with shaking hands. I want to read them. Victoria, not now, later, alone. But I want to. She looked at him, her eyes fierce and broken at the same time. Is that okay? They're yours. They were always supposed to be yours. They stood there in Richard Hale's study, surrounded by the wealth built on manipulation and control, holding letters that should have been read 20 years ago, and Ethan felt the last piece of his certainty crumble. Nothing was what he'd thought it was. Everything hurt. And somehow, impossibly, he was here again, in Victoria's orbit, about to make all the same mistakes, or maybe, finally, some different ones. I should go, he said. Stay. Victoria's voice was raw. Please, just for a while. I don't want to be alone here. So they stayed. Maya eventually wandered off to explore the grounds, pronouncing the whole place fancy but creepy. And Ethan and Victoria sat in the study drinking expensive whiskey. Neither of them tasted, not talking, just existing in the same space. Outside, the winter sun set early, painting everything gold and cold. And upstairs, Richard Hale lay dying with his confession made and his empire about to pass into hands he'd tried so hard to control. 3 days later, he was dead. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday, 4 days after Richard Hale's last breath rattled out of him at 3 a.m. Victoria called Ethan at dawn to tell him, her voice steady but hollow, like she'd used up all her emotion and had nothing left. You don't have to come, she said. I know. But I'd like you to, if you can. Ethan looked at Maya, already awake and sitting at the kitchen table with her cereal, watching him with those two knowing eyes. She nodded before he could even ask the question. We'll be there, he said. The service was held at some historic church in the city, the kind with stained glass windows that cost more than most people's houses and pews that had held generations of the wealthy and powerful. Ethan felt out of place the moment he walked in, his off-the-rack suit suddenly feeling cheaper than it had that morning. Maya stayed close to his side, uncharacteristically quiet. The church was packed. Hundreds of people, all dressed in expensive black, all wearing the same expression of polite mourning. Ethan recognized a few faces from news broadcasts, politicians, CEOs, people whose names carried weight. They'd come to pay respects to power, not to a person. Victoria sat in the front row, flanked by lawyers and executives and people whose job it was to manage appearances. She looked untouchable in her black dress, her hair pulled back so severely it made her face look like a mask. When she glanced back and saw Ethan, something flickered across her expression. Relief, maybe, or just acknowledgement that he'd kept his word. The service was exactly what Ethan expected. Long-winded eulogies that painted Richard Hale as a visionary, a titan, a man who'd shaped industries and changed lives. Nobody mentioned that he'd been a manipulative bastard who'd destroyed his daughter's happiness for the sake of control. Nobody talked about the letters hidden in desk drawers or the lies that had poisoned 2 decades. They talked about legacy instead, about success, about a life well lived, as if length and wealth were the only measures that mattered. Ethan sat through it all, his jaw tight, Maya's hand in his. When it was finally over and people filed out to offer their condolences to Victoria, he hung back, letting the important people have their moment. He watched her accept their sympathy with perfect grace, shaking hands, nodding, saying all the right things while looking like she was 1,000 miles away. "She's really good at that," Maya whispered. "At what?" "Pretending like she's not dying inside." Ethan looked down at his daughter, startled. "How do you know she's pretending?" "Because that's what I did at Mom's funeral. Smiled and said thank you and pretended I was fine because everyone was watching and I didn't know what else to do." Maya's voice was matter-of-fact, but her grip on his hand tightened. "It's exhausting." Something cracked in Ethan's chest. He pulled Maya closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, and she let him, even though she was getting to the age where public affection embarrassed her. When the crowd finally thinned, Ethan approached Victoria. She saw him coming and excused herself from the elderly couple she'd been talking to, meeting him halfway. "Thank you for coming," she said, formal and distant. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine." Victoria saw it. "I'm fine, Ethan. I've been trained for this my whole life. Smile, shake hands, don't let them see you crack. I could do this in my sleep." Her voice was brittle, ready to shatter. "There's a reception at the house. You should come." "I don't think—" "Please." The word came out almost desperate, and the mask slipped just enough for him to see the exhaustion underneath. "I need people there who aren't vultures." So they went. The Hale estate looked different, filled with people. The emptiness that had haunted it before was temporarily covered by bodies and conversation and the clink of crystal glasses. Caterers moved efficiently through the rooms, offering hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than Ethan's grocery budget for a month. Maya stuck close to him initially, overwhelmed by the crowd, but eventually found a quiet corner with a bookshelf and disappeared into a volume about astronomy. Ethan found himself standing alone near the windows, nursing a drink he didn't want, watching Victoria work the room. She was magnificent at it, he had to admit. Gracious and poised, saying exactly what each person needed to hear, playing the role of grieving daughter with the skill of someone who'd spent a lifetime performing. "She's something, isn't she?" Ethan turned. The man beside him was about his age, expensively dressed, with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to worry about money. He looked vaguely familiar. "Bradley Morrison," the man said, extending his hand. "Victoria's ex-husband." "Of course." Ethan shook his hand, probably harder than necessary. "Ethan Cole." "I know who you are." Bradley's smile was knowing. "The one that got away. Or the one Richard drove away, more accurately." "He told you?" "Victoria did, after the divorce. We stayed friends, believe it or not. Hard to hate someone when you both realize you were forced together for someone else's purposes." He took a sip of his drink. Richard was a piece of work, brilliant, ruthless, and completely incapable of seeing his daughter as anything other than a chess piece. "You seem pretty calm about it. It was a long time ago, and honestly, I got off easy. 3 years of a loveless marriage in exchange for the connections that launched my career. Could have been worse." Bradley's eyes followed Victoria across the room. She got the raw end of the deal. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she deserves better than what she got. And because Richard's death means she's finally free to make her own choices, assuming she remembers how." Before Ethan could respond, someone called Bradley away, and he left with a nod, leaving Ethan alone with too many thoughts. The reception dragged on for hours. People told stories about Richard that made him sound like a saint. They raised glasses to his memory. They talked about preserving his legacy, about honoring his vision, about making sure the empire he'd built continued in his image. Nobody mentioned Victoria except as an extension of him, Richard's daughter, Richard's successor, Richard's legacy. It made Ethan sick. By the time the last guest finally left, it was nearly 10. The caterers were packing up, and Maya had fallen asleep in an armchair, her book open on her lap. Victoria stood in the center of the living room, still perfectly composed, looking around at the emptiness like she was seeing it for the first time. "They're gone," she said, and Ethan couldn't tell if she was relieved or devastated. "Yeah." She swayed slightly, and Ethan moved without thinking, catching her elbow. She didn't pull away. "I should go, he said, but he didn't move. "Will you stay?" Victoria's voice was small, nothing like the CEO who'd commanded the room for hours. "Just for a little while. I don't want to be alone in this house." So Ethan called his neighbor to check on the apartment, carried Maya to one of the guest rooms where she barely stirred, and found himself back downstairs with Victoria as the house settled into silence. She'd kicked off her heels and was standing at the window, looking out at the dark grounds. Ethan joined her, keeping a careful distance between them. "I don't feel anything," Victoria said quietly. "I know I should. He was my father. He's dead. I should feel something, but there's just nothing. Emptiness. That's normal." "Is it? Did you feel nothing when your wife died?" The question was blunt, but not cruel, just honest. "No," Ethan admitted. "I felt everything, too much actually. It was overwhelming. What's wrong with me then?" "Nothing's wrong with you. You're in shock. And maybe you're still angry. You're allowed to be angry." "He's dead, Ethan. You can't be angry at dead people." "Sure you can. Dead people are the easiest to be angry at. They can't defend themselves or apologize or change. They just stay what they were." Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then, almost imperceptibly, her shoulders started to shake. Ethan reached for her instinctively, and she turned into him, pressing her face against his shoulder. She didn't cry, exactly. It was more like she was collapsing from the inside out, finally letting go of the iron control that had held her together all day. He wrapped his arms around her and just held on, feeling her shake against him, breathing in the scent of her perfume mixed with exhaustion and grief. They stood like that for a long time. Eventually, Victoria's breathing evened out, and she pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sorry," she said. "Don't be. I got mascara on your shirt." "I'll survive." She almost smiled. "I read your letters." Ethan's breath caught. "When?" "The night after we saw him. I couldn't sleep, so I read them all. Every word." Her eyes met his, red-rimmed but clear. "You really loved me." "I told you that." "I know, but reading it, seeing it in your handwriting, how desperate you were to understand why I wasn't responding, it made it real. And it made what he did so much worse. Victoria, I wrote back, 20 years too late, but I wrote back. To every letter. I couldn't send them to you, obviously, but I needed to say the things I would have said if I'd known, if things had been different. What did you say? That I loved you too, that I was sorry, that I spent years thinking something was wrong with me because I couldn't make myself love Bradley the way I'd loved you." She laughed, bitter and broken. Pathetic, right? Writing responses to letters from 2 decades ago like some kind of emotional time capsule. It's not pathetic. It feels pathetic. They were standing close now, closer than they'd been since that first night at his apartment. Ethan could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way grief had hollowed out her cheeks. She looked tired and real, and nothing like the polished CEO from the funeral. "I should tell you something," Victoria said, "about the will." "You don't have to." "I do, because it affects you." She took a breath. "He left everything jointly to both of us. The estate, the company shares, everything. We have to make decisions together about what to do with it." Ethan stared at her. "What?" "I know. It's insane. Even dead, he's still trying to control things." She moved away from the window, started pacing. "The lawyers called me yesterday. Apparently he changed his will 3 weeks ago, right after he told me to find you." Set it up so neither of us can do anything without the other's agreement. I don't want his money, Victoria. I know. That's probably why he did it. He knew I'd try to refuse, to give it all away or burn it down out of spite. But if you're involved, I have to actually think about it. Have to negotiate, have to... She stopped, running her hands through her hair, destroying the perfect updo. I hate him. Even now, even dead, I hate him. What do you want to do? I want to burn this house to the ground and salt the earth. I want to erase every trace of him and his manipulation and his goddamn empire built on controlling people. Her voice was rising now, anger finally breaking through. I want to scream and break things and make him hurt the way he hurt us. But he's dead, so I can't. I just have to sit here with all this rage and know where to put it. So put it somewhere else. Victoria looked at him, confused. What? You can't hurt him, but you can change what he built. Take all that money and power and legacy he cared so much about and turn it into something he'd hate. Something that actually helps people instead of controlling them. Like what? I don't know, but we've got time to figure it out. Ethan moved closer to her. He wanted to force us together? Fine. Let's be together. Let's make decisions together, and let's make damn sure every single one of them would make him furious. For the first time since the funeral, Victoria really smiled. It was small and sad and a little vicious, but it was real. You're vindictive, she said. I'm practical. There's a difference. I like it. They stood there in Richard Hale's living room, surrounded by his expensive furniture and his carefully curated art and all the trappings of the control he'd wielded for so long, and made a silent pact to tear it all down. Not immediately, not recklessly, but deliberately and completely, until nothing remained of his manipulation except the good they could salvage from the wreckage. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself spending more and more time at the estate. It started with meetings with lawyers and accountants, going through the labyrinthine details of Richard's holdings. The man had been even wealthier than Ethan had imagined, with investments and properties and business interests spreading across continents. This is obscene, Ethan said, looking at yet another spreadsheet of assets. Welcome to generational wealth, Victoria replied dryly. It's exactly as gross as it looks. They met in the study mostly, the same room where they'd found the letters. Someone had cleaned out Richard's personal effects, but his presence still lingered like smoke. Victoria couldn't stand being in there for more than an hour at a time before she'd need to leave, to pace the grounds or stand in the garden breathing cold air until she could face it again. Maya came with him sometimes, doing homework at the massive dining table or exploring the grounds. She and Victoria developed a strange, careful friendship. Victoria didn't try to be motherly. She was smart enough to know that would backfire. But she listened when Maya talked about school or her friends or the science project she was working on. And Maya, perceptive as always, seemed to understand that Victoria needed normalcy more than she needed sympathy. She's sad, Maya said one afternoon, watching Victoria through the window as she walked the grounds alone. Not crying sad, deeper than that? I know. Are you going to help her? I'm trying. Try harder. Maya looked at him seriously. Mom used to say that sometimes people need permission to fall apart. Maybe that's what she needs. Ethan didn't know how to give Victoria permission for anything, but he tried. He stopped treating her like she was fragile, stopped walking on eggshells around her grief. When she snapped at him over something small, he snapped back. When she made a stupid suggestion about selling off assets, he told her it was stupid. When she worked until 2 a.m. going through files, he told her to go to bed and took the files away. She fought him on everything, which was when he knew it was working. The anger was better than the numbness. Anger meant she was feeling something. 3 weeks after the funeral, the lawyer delivered the full terms of the will. It was worse than Victoria had initially described. He wants us to maintain the estate for at least a year before making any major decisions about it, the lawyer explained, a thin man with rimless glasses who looked vaguely embarrassed by the whole thing. The company shares are locked in a trust that requires both signatures for any transactions. And there's a stipulation that any major charitable donations must be agreed upon jointly. So we're stuck, Victoria said flatly. In a manner of speaking, yes. For at least 12 months. After the lawyer left, Victoria threw a crystal paperweight across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, pieces scattering across the hardwood floor. Feel better? Ethan asked. No. Yes. I don't know. She slumped into a chair. A year. We have to deal with this for an entire year. It could be worse. How? Could be forever. She laughed despite herself, a sharp, bitter sound. Always the optimist. Someone has to be. They started spending evenings together after the meetings, usually with Maya there as a buffer. Victoria would order takeout. She couldn't cook, she admitted without shame, and they'd eat in the big empty kitchen while Maya told stories about her day. And Victoria asked questions that were actually interested, not just polite. It was strange how quickly it started to feel normal. Ethan would find himself looking forward to the drive up to the estate, to the rhythm they were developing. Victoria was sharp and funny when she let her guard down, with a dark sense of humor that caught him off guard. And she was good with Maya, treating her like a person instead of a child, which Maya appreciated. I like her, Maya announced one night on the drive home. Yeah? Yeah, she's kind of broken, but she's trying not to be. That's cool. She's not broken. Dad, everyone's broken. Some people just hide it better. Ethan glanced at his daughter, wondering when she'd gotten so wise. Or maybe she'd always been this wise and he just hadn't been paying attention. One evening in early March, about 6 weeks after Richard's death, Victoria asked them to stay for dinner. It was a Friday, no school the next day, and Maya was immediately on board with the plan. They ordered pizza, Victoria's attempt to be casual, though she ordered from some fancy place that delivered wood-fired artisanal pizza instead of normal pizza, and ate in the living room with plates balanced on their laps. This is weird, Victoria said suddenly. What is? Ethan asked through a mouthful of mushroom and truffle oil. This. All of it. You being here. Maya being here. Eating pizza in my father's house like we're a normal... She stopped. Like we're a normal what? Maya asked innocently. Nothing. Never mind. But Ethan had heard what she almost said. Like we're a normal family. After Maya went to explore the library, a room she'd become obsessed with, Ethan and Victoria sat in the silence, not quite looking at each other. I've been thinking, Victoria said finally. Dangerous. Shut up. But she was almost smiling. About the estate, what we could do with it. And? A foundation. Not just throwing money at problems, but actually creating opportunities. Scholarships for kids whose families can't afford college. Mentorship programs. Maybe even a residential program here, at the estate. Turn this monument to wealth into something that actually helps people. Ethan set down his plate. That's a good idea. You sound surprised. I am. Not that it's good, just that you thought of it. I'm not completely heartless. I never thought you were. Victoria pulled her knees up to her chest, looking younger than her 30 years. I keep thinking about us. About what we lost. And I can't get those years back. Can't undo what he did. But maybe I can make sure other people don't lose opportunities because of money or connections or accidents of birth. We, Ethan corrected. What? You said I can make sure. It's we. That's the whole point of his stupid will, right? We have to do this together. Do you want to? Really? Victoria looked at him directly. This isn't your mess. You could walk away. Sign whatever papers release you from the will and go back to your normal life. Could I? I don't know, probably. The lawyers could figure something out. Ethan thought about it. About his small apartment and his quiet life and the simplicity of before Victoria knocked on his door. It would be easy to go back to that. Safe. But Maya was right. Safe wasn't always better. No, he said. I'm in. Let's burn it down and build something better. Victoria's smile was genuine this time, reaching her eyes. Okay then. Partners? Partners. They shook on it, formal and a little ridiculous, and both of them laughed at the absurdity of it. Maya appeared in the doorway, a book in her hand. Are you guys done being weird? We're always weird, Ethan said. Fair point. Can I stay in one of the guest rooms tonight? I'm in the middle of this book and I don't want to stop. Ethan looked at Victoria, who shrugged. Fine by me. The house has plenty of room. So they stayed. Maya disappeared back to her book, and Ethan and Victoria stayed up late, sketching out ideas on notepaper, arguing about details, slowly building something that felt like hope. Around midnight, Victoria stopped mid-sentence and just looked at him. "What?" Ethan asked. "Nothing. Just thank you. For staying, for not running when you had every reason to." "Where would I run to?" "Your nice, quiet, uncomplicated life." "My life hasn't been uncomplicated since you knocked on my door." "Sorry about that. I'm not." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than they should have been. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, and Ethan realized what he'd just admitted. "Ethan, don't. I just mean, I'm not sorry we're doing this. The foundation, working together, that's all." "Right, of course." But she didn't quite look convinced. They went to bed in separate rooms on opposite ends of the house, the distance between them both too much and not enough. The foundation took shape over the following weeks. They hired consultants, met with education specialists, toured programs at other institutions to see what worked and what didn't. Victoria threw herself into it with the same intensity she brought to everything, and Ethan found himself matching her energy, pushing back when she tried to overcomplicate things, simplifying when she got lost in details. They fought about everything: the name of the foundation, the selection criteria for recipients, whether to focus on college prep or vocational training, whether the residential program should be year-round or just summers. "You're impossible," Victoria said during one particularly heated argument about admission requirements. "You're a control freak," Ethan shot back. "I prefer detail-oriented." "I prefer control freak." Maya, watching from the corner where she was supposedly doing homework, shook her head. "You guys fight like married people." They both fell silent. "We do not," Victoria said. "Do too. Mom and Dad used to argue just like this, about everything. It didn't mean they didn't love each other." "Maya," Ethan started, but she was already gone, slipping out of the room with suspicious timing. "Smart kid," Victoria said quietly. "Too smart sometimes." They went back to work, but something had shifted. The arguments felt different now, less like actual disagreements, and more like a dance they both knew the steps to. In April, the lawyers finalized the paperwork for the Hale Foundation for Educational Opportunity. Victoria insisted on including Hale because the name had weight, would attract donations. Ethan hated it, but understood the logic. "Besides," Victoria said, "maybe we can change what the name means. Make it stand for something good instead of manipulation and control. Redemption through rebranding? Something like that." They held a small announcement event at the estate, just local press and a few education advocates. Victoria gave a speech about opportunity and access, about how circumstances of birth shouldn't determine outcomes. She didn't mention her father except to say the foundation was funded by his estate, turning his legacy toward helping others. Ethan watched from the side, Maya beside him, and felt something like pride. Afterward, when the reporters had left and it was just the three of them again, Victoria poured wine for herself and Ethan, sparkling cider for Maya, and raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said. "To burning it down," Ethan added. "To building something better," Maya finished. They drank to that, standing in the house that had felt so cold and empty 6 months ago but was starting to feel like something else, something warmer, something alive. Late that night, after Maya had gone to bed in what had become her room at the estate, Ethan found Victoria on the back terrace, looking at the stars. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much energy. The event went well." "It did. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. Maybe nothing will. Things always go wrong, Ethan. That's life. Or maybe this time they'll go right." She turned to look at him, and in the moonlight she looked exactly like she had at 19, before life and loss and manipulation had added their layers. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked. "About what might have been different if my father hadn't interfered?" "Sometimes." "What do you think would have happened?" Ethan considered. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe we would have lasted. Maybe we would have crashed and burned anyway. We were young and stupid and in love, which is usually a recipe for disaster." "Thanks for the romance. I'm being realistic." "I know. That's what makes it worse." Victoria smiled sadly. I used to have this fantasy that you'd show up one day, tell me it was all a mistake, and we'd pick up where we left off, like no time had passed at all. That's not how life works. I know, but it would have been nice. She paused. I don't want to go back, though. I used to think I did, but I don't. That girl I was, she needed to become this person, and you needed to become who you are. Maya needed to exist. Your wife, Sarah, she mattered. All of it mattered. So what do you want? Victoria turned to face him fully. I want to figure out who we are now. Not who we were. Not who we might have been. Who we actually are right now, with all our scars and baggage and complications. That sounds terrifying. It is. And if it doesn't work, then at least we'll know. For real this time. No lies, no manipulation. Just us, making our own choices. Ethan stepped closer. When did you get so brave? I'm not brave. I'm tired of being scared. They stood there on the terrace, the spring air cool against their skin, the house dark behind them. Somewhere inside, Maya slept in a bed that cost more than most cars. Around them, the estate sprawled, massive and expensive, and finally starting to serve a purpose beyond glorifying one man's ego. And between them, something was growing, careful and slow and frightened but real. Not the wild, reckless love of 19, but something steadier, something that might actually last. Ethan didn't kiss her, not yet. It was too soon, too complicated, too everything. But he reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Partners, he said. Partners, she agreed. And for now, that was enough. The estate became something else as spring turned to summer. Workers arrived to convert the East Wing into dormitory space for the Foundation's first residential cohort. Contractors tore out walls and updated electrical, and the sound of construction became the house's new heartbeat. Victoria was there almost every day, overseeing details, and Ethan found himself there almost as often, ostensibly to help, but really because leaving felt wrong. Maya finished 5th grade and immediately declared she wanted to spend the summer at the estate, helping set up the library for incoming students. Neither Ethan nor Victoria argued. The truth was, they'd all started treating the place like home without quite admitting it out loud. The first crack in their careful partnership came in early June over something stupid. They were in the study reviewing applications for the Foundation's advisory board when Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at it, frowned, and let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Just answer it, Ethan said. It's Bradley. So? You said you were friends. Victoria sighed and picked up. This isn't a good time. A pause. No, I haven't thought about it. Another pause. Longer this time. Bradley, I said no. The answer's still no. She hung up, her jaw tight. What did he want? Nothing important. Victoria. He wants to invest in the Foundation. Major donation. His name on a building. The whole thing. She tossed her phone on the desk. And before you say it's a good idea, it's not. I know exactly what he's doing. What's he doing? Buying his way back into my life. He's done it before. Whenever he's between relationships or feeling nostalgic, he throws money at something I care about and thinks it'll make me grateful. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You're sure that's what this is? I know, Bradley. This is what he does. Okay, but... Ethan stopped himself. But what? Nothing. Say it. It's a lot of money, Victoria. Money the Foundation could use. Maybe his motives don't matter if the outcome helps kids. Victoria's expression went cold. I can't believe you're taking his side. I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm being practical. No, you're being... She stopped, visibly trying to control herself. You know what? Fine. If you think it's such a great idea, you call him back and work out the details. I'm done for the day. She left before he could respond, her footsteps sharp on the hardwood. Ethan sat there feeling like he'd missed something important, but not quite sure what. Maya appeared in the doorway 5 minutes later. What did you do? Why do you assume I did something? Because Victoria just went outside and she looked like she wanted to punch something, and you're sitting here looking confused. So what did you do? Ethan explained about Bradley and the donation. Maya listened, her expression thoughtful. You're an idiot, she said when he finished. Excuse me? Dad, she told you about Bradley, how her father pushed them together, how she married him because she thought you didn't want her, and now he's trying to use money to get close to her again, and you're telling her to take it. How do you not see the problem? It's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. You're asking her to let someone manipulate her with money. Again. Of course she's mad. Ethan put his head in his hands. When did you get so smart about relationships? I read a lot, and I pay attention. Maya crossed her arms. You should apologize. I know. He found Victoria in the garden, sitting on a stone bench near the roses that were just starting to bloom. She didn't look up when he approached. I'm an idiot, he said. Yes. Maya explained it to me. The Bradley thing. I didn't see it before, but I do now. I don't need you to agree with every decision I make, Ethan, but I need you to trust that when I say no to something, I have a reason. I do trust you. Then act like it. She finally looked at him. This is hard enough without you second-guessing me every time money's involved. You're right. I'm sorry. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Bradley's not a bad person, just wrong for me. And I spent 3 years of my life pretending that didn't matter because it made my father happy. I won't do that again. Not for anyone. I understand. Do you? She stood up, facing him directly. Because sometimes I think you still see me as that girl from 20 years ago, the one who chose money over you. And I need you to understand that she didn't exist. I never chose money. I was manipulated, same as you. I know that. Intellectually, maybe, but do you feel it? Do you really believe it? Ethan didn't answer right away because he wanted to be honest. I'm trying to. That's fair. Victoria's shoulders dropped slightly. I'm sorry I snapped at you. You had a right to. Still, I'm working on not being so defensive about everything. It's harder than it should be. They stood there among the roses, the summer heat making the air thick and sweet. Somewhere behind them, construction noise filtered through the open windows. Maya was probably watching from somewhere, making sure they worked it out. We're going to fight, Victoria said, about stupid things and important things and everything in between. That's just how this works. I know. But we have to be able to come back from it, to trust that one argument doesn't end everything. I can do that. Can you? Because I need to know, Ethan, before this goes any further, before we... She stopped herself. I need to know you're not going to bail the first time things get complicated. I've been here for 6 months, through lawyers and foundations, and your father's death and all of it. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? The word was small, almost childlike, and it reminded him that underneath the CEO exterior was someone who'd been abandoned and manipulated and lied to for most of her life. I promise, he said. Victoria nodded, something easing in her expression. Okay, good. They walked back to the house together, not touching but close enough that their hands brushed occasionally. Maya gave them both a thumbs up from the library window, completely shameless, and they both laughed. 2 weeks later, the foundation received an anonymous donation. $5 million, no strings attached, no name on any buildings. The wire transfer came with a note. For the kids, best wishes. Victoria stared at the bank statement. It's from Bradley. How do you know? Because it's exactly something he'd do after I rejected his public donation. Make it anonymous so I can't refuse without looking insane. She smiled despite herself. He's infuriating. But the foundation can use it? Yeah, we can use it. The money funded the renovation of the entire West Wing, adding 20 more beds to the residential program and a state-of-the-art computer lab. Victoria sent Bradley a text that said simply, "Thank you." She showed it to Ethan before sending, like she needed his approval. He nodded. That's good, he said, gracious but not encouraging. Did you just compliment my texting skills? Don't let it go to your head. The first cohort of students arrived in late July, 15 teenagers from across the state whose families couldn't afford college prep programs. They were nervous and excited and completely overwhelmed by the estate. Maya appointed herself as unofficial tour guide, showing them around with the confidence of someone who'd been there for months. Ethan watched Victoria during the welcome dinner, seeing the way she interacted with the kids. She was good with them, more natural than she probably realized. She listened when they talked, asked follow-up questions, remembered details. By the end of the evening, half of them were comfortable enough to joke with her. "You're good at this," he told her later, after the students had gone to bed and the staff had finished cleaning up. "At what?" "This, all of it. You care about these kids." "Of course I care. That's the whole point." "I know, but you're not just writing checks and showing up for photo ops. You actually give a damn." Victoria looked uncomfortable with the praise. "My father never did. Any charity work he did was for appearances. I always hated that. The performative caring. This isn't performative. No, it's not." She smiled, small and genuine. "These kids remind me of you, actually. Smart and scrappy and full of potential that nobody's bothering to nurture. If someone had invested in you the way we're investing in them, I turned out fine. You did. But you could have done more, been more, if you'd had the right opportunities at the right time. I have a good life, Victoria. A great kid. A job I don't hate. That's more than a lot of people get." "I know, but don't you ever wonder what if?" Ethan thought about the letters he'd written, the college applications he'd never submitted because he couldn't afford the fees, the dreams he'd set aside when Sarah got sick, and Maya needed stability more than he needed ambition. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but wondering doesn't change anything." "No, but maybe making sure these kids don't have to wonder. Maybe that changes something." The program ran smoothly for 3 weeks. Then, on a Tuesday in mid-August, everything went to hell. Ethan got the call at work. Victoria, her voice tight and controlled in a way that meant she was barely holding it together. "Something happened. Can you come?" He left immediately, making excuses to his boss and breaking probably half a dozen traffic laws on the drive up. When he arrived, there were police cars in the driveway and 2 officers talking to Victoria near the front entrance. The students were clustered on the lawn, supervised by staff, looking scared. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, jogging over. "One of the students is missing," Victoria said. "Marcus Chen, 16, been with us for 3 weeks. His roommate says he packed a bag last night and left." "Did he say where he was going?" "No, just that he couldn't do this anymore." Victoria's hands were shaking slightly. "I should have seen something, should have known he was struggling." The officer, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, spoke up. "Ms. Hale, you can't predict this kind of thing. Sometimes kids run, it's not your fault. He's my responsibility, and we'll find him. We've got his description, we're checking bus stations and known associates. Most runaways come back within 24 hours. But Marcus didn't come back in 24 hours, or 48. By the 3rd day, Victoria was barely sleeping, spending every waking moment coordinating with police, calling shelters, checking social media for any sign of him. Ethan stayed with her, making sure she ate, forcing her to rest even when she insisted she was fine. Maya helped too, keeping the other students calm, organizing activities to keep them distracted. She was good in a crisis, better than most adults. "He'll come back," Maya told Victoria on the 4th day. "He just needs time to figure out that running doesn't fix anything." "How do you know?" "Because I thought about running after Mom died. Figured if I just left, I wouldn't have to feel how much it hurt. But Dad wouldn't let me. He just kept showing up, kept making me do normal things until normal didn't hurt so much anymore." Victoria looked at Ethan, something vulnerable in her expression. "You never told me that." "You never asked." On the 5th day, Marcus showed up at a youth shelter downtown. He was scared and exhausted and ashamed, but he was safe. Victoria and Ethan drove to get him immediately. In the car on the way back, Marcus sat in the back seat, staring out the window. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "What happened?" Victoria asked, her voice gentle. It was too much. Everyone there is so smart and confident, and they all know what they want. And I'm nobody. I don't belong." "That's not true," Ethan said. "You don't understand. You're successful. You have your life together. You don't know what it's like to feel like you're faking it all the time." Victoria laughed, sharp and bitter. "Marcus, I spent the first 30 years of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I married someone I didn't love, worked a job I hated, lived in my father's shadow because I was too scared to do anything else. Everyone feels like they're faking it. The successful people just fake it better. Marcus looked surprised. Really? Really? And you know what? You belong at that program because we chose you, because we saw something in you worth investing in. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try. They brought him back to the estate, and Victoria quietly arranged for a counselor to work with him twice a week. She didn't make a big deal out of it, didn't announce it to the other students, just took care of it. That night, after Marcus was settled and the crisis had passed, Ethan found Victoria on the terrace again. She'd stopped shaking, but she looked wrung out, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. "You okay?" he asked. "I thought we'd lost him. I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought I'd failed him the way my father failed me." "You didn't fail anyone." "I almost did. If he hadn't gone to that shelter, if something had happened, but it didn't. He's safe. He's back. And he's back because he knew he could come back, because you built something that felt worth returning to." Victoria turned to him, and there were tears on her face now, the first real tears he'd seen since her father's funeral. "I'm terrified, Ethan, all the time. Terrified I'm going to screw this up, that I'm going to hurt these kids, that I'm going to become my father without meaning to." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you care too much. Your father never cared about anything except control. You care about everything, sometimes too much." She laughed, watery and broken. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "I don't know. Does it?" "A little." She wiped her eyes. "Thank you for being here, for not thinking I'm crazy." "You're not crazy. You're just human. That might be worse." Ethan pulled her into a hug without thinking, and she came willingly, pressing her face against his shoulder the way she had after her father died. But this time it felt different. Less about grief and more about trust. About letting someone see you at your worst and knowing they wouldn't leave. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Okay." "I'm falling in love with you. Again, or maybe still, I don't know. But it's happening, and I thought you should know." Ethan's heart stopped, then started again, too fast. If you're going to say it's too soon or too complicated, save it. I know it's both, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel things just because feeling them is scary. "I wasn't going to say that." She pulled back to look at him. "What were you going to say?" "That I feel it too. Have been for a while now. I just didn't know how to say it. So say it now." But Ethan didn't say it. Instead, he kissed her, pulling her close and kissing her the way he'd wanted to for months. She kissed him back like she'd been waiting for it, her hands fisting in his shirt, and for a moment everything else fell away. The foundation, the students, the ghosts of their past, none of it mattered except this. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. "Took you long enough," she said. "I'm slow. Sue me." "I might. I know good lawyers." They kissed again, slower this time, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless and uncertain for 20 years finally finding its place. "Dad? Victoria?" They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Maya stood in the doorway trying very hard not to grin. "What?" Ethan asked, aiming for casual and missing by a mile. "Nothing. Just wanted to let you know I'm going to bed. You two, carry on." She disappeared back inside, and they heard her laughing as she went. "She's never letting us live this down," Victoria said. "Nope. Worth it, though." "Yeah, definitely worth it." They stayed on the terrace until late, talking and not talking, just being together in a way they hadn't allowed themselves before. When they finally went inside, Ethan walked Victoria to her room and kissed her goodnight at the door, like they were on a proper date. "This is weird," Victoria said. "What is?" "Being happy. I keep waiting for something to ruin it. Maybe nothing will. You said that before." "I'm optimistic." "It's annoying, I know." She kissed him again, soft and quick. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." He made it 3 steps down the hall before she called after him. "Hey, Ethan." "Yeah?" "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and perfect. "I love you too," he said. The next morning, they told Maya over breakfast. She rolled her eyes so hard Ethan worried she'd hurt herself. "Finally," she said, "I've been waiting months for you two to figure it out." "You knew?" Victoria asked. "Everyone knew. You were both so obvious it hurt to watch." "We were subtle. You really weren't. The students figured it out within a week. Nobody said anything directly, but there were knowing looks and poorly suppressed grins whenever Ethan and Victoria were in the same room. They tried to keep things professional during program hours, but it was hard when every accidental touch felt electric. "We're being ridiculous," Victoria said one afternoon, after they'd both reached for the same file and ended up just staring at each other like idiots. "Completely," Ethan agreed. "The kids think it's adorable. The kids need to mind their business." But he was smiling when he said it. In September, the foundation hosted an open house for potential donors and community partners. The students had spent weeks preparing presentations about their experiences, and the event was a chance to showcase what the program had accomplished. Ethan watched Victoria give the opening remarks and felt something like pride. She was confident and articulate, making the case for the foundation's work without ever sounding like she was asking for anything. Just presenting facts, telling stories, letting the results speak for themselves. Afterward, as people mingled and the students showed off their projects, a woman approached Ethan. She was in her 50s, well-dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You must be Ethan Cole," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Jennifer Vasquez. I write for the Tribune. Nice to meet you. I've been researching the foundation. Very impressive work you and Ms. Hale are doing." "Thank you." "I'm curious, though. The story behind it. Richard Hale wasn't exactly known for his philanthropic impulses. What changed?" Ethan chose his words carefully. "Sometimes it takes a wake-up call to realize what matters. Mr. Hale wanted to create a different kind of legacy." "And you and Ms. Hale, you were close to him?" "Ms. Hale is his daughter. I'm just helping with the foundation." "Just helping?" Jennifer's smile was knowing. "My sources tell me you're co-trustees of the estate. That's not exactly just helping." "I'm not sure what you're asking." "I'm asking about the story, Mr. Cole. The real story. A billionaire dies and leaves his fortune jointly to his daughter and her high school sweetheart? That's interesting. Especially when that sweetheart disappeared from her life 20 years ago and suddenly reappears right before dear old dad kicks it." Ethan felt his stomach drop. I'm not trying to make trouble. I'm trying to understand. Was this about redemption? About Richard Hale trying to fix what he broke? Or is there something else going on?" "It's about giving kids opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have," Ethan said firmly. "That's the story. The rest is private." "Private doesn't stay private long when there's this much money involved." Jennifer pulled out a business card. "When you're ready to talk, really talk, call me. I'd rather get the truth from you than piece it together from public records and speculation." She left before he could respond. Ethan stared at the card in his hand, feeling the foundation of their carefully constructed new life starting to crack. He found Victoria in the library, chatting with a group of potential donors. He waited until she was free, then pulled her aside. "We have a problem," he said, and explained about Jennifer Vasquez. Victoria's expression went cold. "She's fishing. She doesn't actually know anything. She knows enough. And she's going to dig. You know she will. So we don't give her anything to find." "Victoria, no. We've worked too hard to let some reporter turn this into a scandal. The foundation matters. These kids matter. I won't let anyone destroy that for a story. What if the truth comes out anyway? Then we deal with it, but we don't hand it to her on a platter." That night, after the event ended and the house was quiet, they fought about it. Really fought. Not the playful arguments they'd gotten used to. "You're being naive, Victoria said. "If we tell her everything, she'll twist it into whatever gets clicks. Scorned lovers reunited by deathbed confession? She'll make it sound tawdry and manipulative. And if we don't tell her and she finds out anyway, we look like we're hiding something, which we are. We're not hiding anything. We're keeping our private lives private. There's a difference between privacy and secrecy. Not when it comes to the media, there isn't." They went to bed angry, in separate rooms, and Ethan lay awake wondering if this was the beginning of the end, if the pressure would break them before they'd even really begun. But in the morning, Victoria knocked on his door carrying coffee. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was scared and I took it out on you." "I'm sorry, too, for pushing. You weren't wrong, though, about the secrecy. If we're going to do this, really do this, we need to be on the same page. So what do? We talk to her, together, tell the story on our terms before she tells it on hers." They set up the interview for the following week. Jennifer Vasquez arrived with a recorder and a notepad, professional and sharp. They sat in the study, the same room where Victoria had found the letters, and told the truth. All of it. The summer they'd fallen in love, Richard's manipulation, the lost years. The deathbed confession and the inheritance neither of them wanted, but both felt obligated to use well. How they'd found each other again, older and scarred, but maybe finally ready. Jennifer listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's quite a story," she said finally. "It's our story," Victoria said. "Take it or leave it." "Oh, I'm taking it, but I'm going to write it honestly, which means including the parts that aren't pretty." We wouldn't expect anything less. The article ran 2 weeks later, front page of the Sunday edition. The headline read, "A Foundation Built on Lost Love and Second Chances." It was fair and thorough and made them both sound more heroic than they felt. The response was immediate. Donations poured in. Other foundations reached out about partnerships. The program's waiting list tripled overnight. "Well," Victoria said, reading the article for the third time, "that could have been worse. You were right to tell the truth." "We were right, together." Maya, reading over their shoulders, made a gagging sound. "You guys are so cheesy." "Noted," Ethan said. But he didn't care. For the first time in 20 years, everything felt right. Complicated and messy and imperfect, but right. The Foundation's first cohort graduated the program in October. All 15 students accepted to colleges they never could have afforded without the preparation and support they'd received. At the ceremony, Marcus gave a speech about second chances and not running from hard things. He thanked Victoria specifically, his voice cracking, and Ethan watched her fight back tears. Afterward, as families celebrated and students said their goodbyes, Victoria pulled Ethan aside. "I have something for you," she said. She led him to the study and pulled a folder from the desk drawer. Inside were papers, legal documents with lots of dense text. "What is this?" "A proposal to renovate the main house and turn it into year-round housing for students. Make the program permanent instead of just summers. It would be expensive and complicated and probably insane, but..." "Yes," Ethan said. "I haven't even finished explaining. I don't need you to. Yes, let's do it." Victoria smiled, and it was the smile he remembered from when they were 19, bright and hopeful and unguarded. "We're really doing this," she said, "building something that lasts." "Yeah, we are." They kissed there among the filing cabinets and legal documents, and Ethan thought about how strange life was, how grief and loss and manipulation could somehow lead to this. To standing in a dead man's study, planning to turn his monument to control into a home for kids who needed someone to believe in them. Richard Hale would have hated it. That made it even better. The renovation plans took over their lives in a way neither of them had anticipated. By November, the estate was a construction zone, with architects and engineers measuring every square foot of the main house, debating load-bearing walls and electrical capacity and 1,000 other details Ethan had never thought about. He'd given up his apartment in October. It had happened gradually, almost without discussion. First, it was staying over a few nights a week because it was late and the drive home was long. Then it was keeping clothes in Victoria's room because it was practical. Then one day he realized he hadn't been back to his place in 3 weeks, and the lease was up for renewal. "Just move in," Victoria had said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "That's a big step. We're planning to house 40 teenagers in this building, and you think sharing a bedroom is a big step? When you put it that way." So he'd let the lease go, packed up the small apartment that had been home for 5 years, and moved himself and Maya into the estate permanently. Maya got the room she'd already claimed as hers, with its view of the gardens and the built-in bookshelves she'd filled with her growing collection. Ethan moved into Victoria's room, which still felt surreal every morning when he woke up. The first real fight in their new living arrangement came in mid-November, over something completely predictable. Ethan had been looking at the budget for the renovation, and the numbers made his head spin. They were planning to spend more on updating the electrical system than he'd made in the last 3 years combined. "We need to scale back," he said over dinner one night. Victoria looked up from her laptop. "Scale back what?" "All of it. The renovations are out of control. We're spending money like it's infinite. It's not infinite, but we have enough. The foundation is well funded. That's not the point. These kids we're trying to help, they're going to see this place and think we're just more rich people playing at charity. $100,000 on custom windows? Really? Those windows are energy efficient. They'll save money in the long run. They're also ostentatious as hell." Victoria's expression cooled. "So what do you want? To house them in some rundown building so they remember they're poor? That's not what I'm saying. It's exactly what you're saying. You want them to be grateful for scraps instead of giving them something beautiful. I want them to see that we understand where they're coming from, that we're not just throwing money at problems from our ivory tower." "Ivory tower?" Victoria stood up, her voice rising. "You're the one who moved into the ivory tower, Ethan. You're the one living in this house, sleeping in my bed, making decisions about how to spend the money. You don't get to be working class and virtuous while enjoying all the benefits of wealth." The words hit like a slap. Maya, who'd been pretending to do homework at the other end of the table, quietly gathered her things and left. "That's not fair," Ethan said. "Isn't it? You want to help these kids, but you also want to keep your hands clean, to be the noble poor person who never sold out. But you can't have it both ways." I'm not trying to... Yes, you are. And I'm tired of apologizing for having money. I didn't ask for it. I didn't earn it. Not really. But it's here. And we can either use it to actually help people, or we can make symbolic gestures that make you feel better about your working class credentials. Ethan felt anger rising in his chest. "You don't understand. Enlighten me. You've never had to worry about money, never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, never had to tell your kid she can't do something because you can't afford it. So yeah, dropping $100,000 on windows feels obscene to me because I know what that money could mean to someone who actually needs it. And you think I don't? You think I can't imagine what it's like to struggle because I've never done it?" Victoria's voice was sharp now, cutting. "I've spent my entire adult life working with businesses, with people, understanding markets and needs and resources. I'm not some princess in a tower, Ethan. I know what poverty looks like. I just also know that these kids deserve better than the bare minimum. I never said, you implied it. You always imply it. Every time we talk about spending money, you get this look like I'm being frivolous, like wanting nice things for these kids is somehow morally wrong. That's not what I think. Then what do you think?" Ethan struggled to find the words. "I think I'm scared." Victoria stopped, her anger deflating slightly. "Of what? Of losing myself in this. Of becoming the kind of person who thinks $100,000 is nothing. Of..." He stopped, frustrated. "Of turning into someone Sarah wouldn't recognize." The name hung in the air between them. Ethan had barely talked about Sarah since they'd gotten together, and Victoria had been careful not to push. But there it was, the ghost that lived between them. Victoria sat back down, her voice softer now. "Tell me about her." "What?" "Sarah, you never talk about her. I know she died, I know Maya loved her, but that's all I know. Tell me about her." Ethan hesitated. "Why?" "Because she matters. Because she was part of your life, part of Maya's life, and I need to understand that if we're going to do this." So Ethan told her about meeting Sarah at work, how she'd been funny and practical and completely unimpressed by his brooding, how she'd made him laugh when he thought he'd forgotten how they'd built a quiet, comfortable life together that wasn't passionate or dramatic but was solid and real. "She used to joke that I married down," he said. "She came from money, not like yours, but enough. Her parents hated that she was with me, thought she could do better. But she didn't care. No, she didn't care about any of that. She just wanted a simple life, a family, normal things." He rubbed his face. "When she got sick, when the medical bills started piling up, she made me promise not to ask her parents for help. Said she'd rather die broke than give them the satisfaction of being right about me. Did she? Die broke? Almost. The bills wiped out everything we'd saved. If it wasn't for Maya's grandparents, Sarah's parents, paying for the funeral, I don't know what I would have done. And even then, they made it clear they were doing it for Maya, not for me. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. No, but I'm sorry anyway. And I understand now why you're so careful about money, why you don't want to be the kind of person who's casual about it. I don't want to forget what it's like to struggle. I don't want Maya to forget. She won't, not with you as her father. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. But Ethan, you're allowed to have nice things. You're allowed to enjoy this. It doesn't make you a bad person. It feels like betrayal sometimes. Like I'm betraying Sarah, betraying who I was. Or maybe you're just becoming who you would have been if life hadn't beaten it out of you. They sat there holding hands across the table, the budget forgotten, and Ethan felt something ease in his chest. The guilt didn't disappear. He wasn't sure it ever would, but it felt less suffocating. The windows can stay, he said finally. Victoria smiled. Thank you. But I want to add something to the budget. A scholarship fund specifically for kids whose families are dealing with medical debt. In Sarah's name. I think that's perfect. They revised the plans together that night, finding compromises that honored both their perspectives. It wasn't easy, and they still disagreed on half the details, but they were learning to fight without destroying, learning to hear each other even when they didn't agree. Maya appeared around midnight, book in hand, and surveyed the papers spread across the table. You guys work it out? She asked. Getting there, Basint, Ethan said. Good. Because your fighting voice carries, and I'm trying to read. Sorry, kiddo. It's okay. Just keep it down next time. She started to leave, then turned back. Also, Dad? Mom would have liked Victoria, just so you know. She was gone before he could respond, leaving Ethan staring after her with his throat tight. She's something else, Victoria said softly. Yeah, she is. December brought the holidays, which neither Ethan nor Victoria had really thought through. The foundation was on winter break, the students gone home to their families, and suddenly they were facing the prospect of their first Christmas together. What do you usually do? Victoria asked. Nothing much. Maya and I exchange gifts, watch movies, eat too much. Pretty low-key. We used to have these massive parties, hundreds of people, full catering, the whole thing. I always hated them. So let's not do that. What should we do instead? They settled on something small, just the three of them, plus a few staff members who didn't have family nearby. They decorated a tree together, Maya directing the process with the authority of someone who took holiday decorating very seriously. They hung lights on the house, and Ethan nearly fell off the ladder twice before Victoria banned him from heights. On Christmas Eve, they drove into the city to volunteer at a shelter, serving dinner to families who had nowhere else to go. Maya worked the serving line with fierce concentration, making sure everyone got enough. Victoria spent most of the evening talking to the kids, asking about school, about their lives, actually listening to the answers. On the drive home, Maya fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted and happy. Victoria drove while Ethan watched the city lights blur past. That was good, Victoria said quietly. Yeah, it was. I want to do more of that. Not just the foundation, but actual hands-on work. Getting out of the estate, being with people. We can do that. I spent so long being the person my father wanted me to be. Going to the right parties, knowing the right people, playing the game. And I was good at it, but I hated every minute. She glanced at him. This is better. This feels real. Christmas morning was chaos in the best way. Maya was up at 6, dragging them both downstairs to the tree. They'd all agreed on modest gifts, but somehow the pile of presents had grown anyway. Maya got books and art supplies and a telescope she'd been wanting. Ethan got a new watch and boots and a leather jacket that Victoria claimed was practical but was clearly expensive. Victoria got jewelry and scarves, and for Maya, a framed drawing of the three of them standing in front of the estate. I made it from a photo, Maya explained, suddenly shy. Is it stupid? It's perfect, Victoria said, her voice thick. Absolutely perfect. They hung it in the study, right above the desk where the letters had been hidden, a new memory covering an old pain. January brought the second cohort of students, 20 this time instead of 15. The expansion was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but they were committed now. The renovations on the main house were still months from completion, so they converted the old carriage house into temporary classrooms and housing. One of the new students was a girl named Keisha Wright, 17 and angry at the world. She'd been in and out of foster care, bounced between schools, and had the kind of chip on her shoulder that came from years of being let down by adults who were supposed to care. "She's going to be trouble," one of the staff members said during orientation. Victoria overheard and stepped in. "Good. We could use more trouble around here." Keisha proved difficult from day one. She skipped classes, talked back to instructors, picked fights with other students. After a week, the staff was ready to send her home. "No," Victoria said firmly. "She stays. She's disrupting the entire program. She's testing us, seeing if we mean it when we say we won't give up on them. If we send her home now, we prove that we're just like everyone else who's abandoned her. So what do you suggest? I'll work with her, one-on-one, figure out what she needs." Ethan watched Victoria take on Keisha as a personal project, spending hours talking with her, finding out what made her angry, what scared her, what she wanted from life. It wasn't smooth. Keisha fought her every step of the way, pushing buttons, testing boundaries, doing everything she could to make Victoria give up. But Victoria didn't give up. "You remind me of her," Ethan said one night after a particularly rough session where Keisha had screamed that she didn't need anybody's help and stormed out. "Keisha, we're nothing alike. You're both terrified of trusting people, both convinced that everyone will eventually let you down, both fighting like hell to keep anyone from getting close enough to hurt you." Victoria was quiet. "That's not—" "It is. And you know it," she sighed. "Fine. Maybe we're a little alike, but I had advantages she doesn't. Money, education, opportunities. She's got nothing. She's got you now, if you don't scare her off. I'm not scary. You're terrifying, in the best way." It took another month, but slowly, gradually, Keisha started to soften, started showing up to class, started participating, started tentatively trusting that maybe these people meant what they said. The breakthrough came in February during a college preparation workshop. Keisha had been quiet all session, and afterward Victoria found her sitting alone in the library, staring at college brochures. "You okay?" Victoria asked. "This is stupid." "What is?" "All of this. College applications, essays, pretending I have a shot at any of this. I'm nobody. I've got nothing. Why would any school want me?" Victoria sat down next to her. "Can I tell you something? If you're going to give me some inspirational speech about believing in myself, no. I'm going to tell you that I felt exactly the same way when I applied to college. I had all the advantages, money, connections, test scores, and I still felt like a fraud. Like I didn't deserve to be there. That's different. I had a father who controlled every aspect of my life and made me believe that my only value was in who I married and what I could do for his company. I had money, sure, but I didn't have me. Didn't have any idea who I was or what I wanted or if I was capable of anything on my own." Victoria looked at Keisha directly. "You have something I didn't. You've survived things that would have broken me. You've learned to depend on yourself because nobody else was reliable. That's not nothing, Keisha. That's strength. Strength doesn't get you into college. No, but it helps you survive it, and will help you with the rest, the applications, the essays, the test prep. You're not doing this alone." Keisha's eyes were wet. "Why do you care?" "Because somebody should have cared about me when I was your age, should have told me I was worth more than what my father decided. And because I see you, Keisha. I see how smart you are, how hard you work when you let yourself, how much potential you have, and I refuse to let you waste it because you're scared. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. And that's okay. Being scared means you care about the outcome." After that conversation, Keisha changed. Not completely, not overnight, but enough. She started asking for help instead of refusing it, started engaging with the program instead of fighting it. And she and Victoria developed a tentative friendship, built on mutual recognition of each other's defenses and the courage to lower them. Ethan watched it happen and fell a little more in love with Victoria every day. She was good at this, better than she realized. She saw these kids not as projects or charity cases, but as people. Complicated, difficult, worthy people. By March, the main house renovations were finally complete. The estate had been transformed from a monument to one man's ego into something alive and purposeful. The East Wing now housed 40 students in comfortable rooms designed for both privacy and community. The West Wing held classrooms, a computer lab, a maker space, a library that would have made any school jealous. The grounds had been updated with walking paths, a vegetable garden the students would maintain, even a small amphitheater for performances and gatherings. The grand opening was scheduled for the first weekend in April. They invited donors, community partners, education advocates, and most importantly, the families of their students. It was a celebration and a statement of purpose all at once. The night before the event, Ethan found Victoria standing in the main hall, looking around with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That my father would hate this." "Good. Every single thing we've done, opening this place up, filling it with people he would have considered beneath him, turning his private sanctuary into a public resource, he would have despised all of it. Even better." Victoria smiled, but it was sad. "I wish he could see it, just so I could watch him realize that his control didn't last beyond the grave, that we took everything he built on manipulation and turned it into something honest. He knows. Wherever he is, he knows." "You think?" "I think the dead see more than we give them credit for. Sarah's probably watching too, judging my parenting choices and my relationship decisions." "What do you think she'd say?" Ethan thought about it. "That I'm overthinking everything, as usual. That Maya's doing fine, and that if I'm happy, I should stop waiting for permission to admit it." "Are you? Happy?" He pulled her close, right there in the hallway that used to echo with emptiness and now hummed with possibility. "Yeah, terrified and overwhelmed and constantly worried we're going to screw something up, but happy." "Me too." The grand opening went better than they could have hoped. Families toured the facilities with pride and wonder. Donors wrote checks. Community partners committed to collaborations. The students showed off their work, confident and articulate, proving that the program was more than just a nice idea. Marcus gave another speech, this one about transformation and trust. Keisha performed a spoken word piece about survival and second chances that left half the audience in tears. Maya, who'd been helping with event planning, moved through the crowd making sure everyone had what they needed, comfortable and competent in a way that made Ethan's chest tight with pride. And Victoria was everywhere at once, talking to donors and students and families, making connections, building bridges, doing the work she was so good at, but now in service of something she actually believed in. Late in the afternoon, during a quiet moment, Bradley Morrison appeared. Ethan hadn't known he was coming, and from Victoria's expression, neither had she. "Impressive," Bradley said, looking around. "Really impressive." "Thank you," Victoria said carefully. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I know, I crashed. Sorry. But I wanted to see what you'd built, and to apologize." "For what?" "For our marriage. For going along with your father's plans instead of being honest with you, with both of us." "Bradley, that was years ago." "I know, but I never said it. That I was sorry. That you deserved better than someone who married you for connections and convenience." He glanced at Ethan. "Looks like you found it." Victoria's hand found Ethan's. "I did." "Good, that's good." Bradley smiled, and it was genuine. "You two are doing something real here, something that matters. I'm glad." He left after that, disappearing into the crowd, and Victoria leaned against Ethan. "That was weird," she said. "Yeah, but kind of nice?" "Yeah." The event wound down as the sun set, families departing with promises to stay in touch, donors pledging continued support, students chattering about plans and dreams and possibilities. By 8 o'clock, it was just staff and the core team, cleaning up and decompressing. Maya found Ethan and Victoria in the kitchen, sitting at the counter sharing a beer. "We did good," she announced. "We did," Victoria agreed. "So, When are you two getting married? Ethan choked on his beer. Victoria froze. What? Ethan managed. You heard me. You're living together, running a foundation together, basically already married in every way that matters. So when's the wedding? Maya, what? It's a reasonable question. You love each other, right? That's not... It's more complicated than... Ethan looked at Victoria, helpless. Victoria was staring at Maya with a mixture of shock and something that might have been consideration. That's a very direct question. I'm a very direct person, so? So we haven't talked about it, Victoria said carefully. Maybe you should. Maya grabbed a juice box from the fridge and left, casual as anything, like she hadn't just lobbed a grenade into their relationship. Ethan and Victoria sat in silence for a long moment. Kids, Ethan said finally. Yeah. More silence. She's not wrong, though, Victoria said quietly. About which part? All of it. We are basically married already. We run a foundation together, live together, make major life decisions together. We're a family. So what are you saying? Victoria turned to face him fully. I'm saying maybe we should talk about it. Not now, not tonight, but sometime. Because I love you, Ethan. And I love Maya, and I want this to be official, real. Not just something we fell into, but something we chose. Ethan's heart was racing. You want to get married? Eventually, yes. If you do. Yes, yeah, I do. Okay then. Okay. They smiled at each other, awkward and giddy, and Ethan thought about how strange it was, how terrifying and perfect it felt to be planning a future with someone he'd loved and lost and found again. How Sarah would have liked Victoria, would have approved of this strange second chance. How sometimes life broke you open just so it could fill you with something better than what you'd lost. That night, lying in bed with Victoria asleep beside him, Ethan thought about promises. The one he'd made to Sarah to take care of Maya. The one he'd made to Victoria's father, unspoken but real, to see the truth and deal with it. The ones he was making now to Victoria and Maya and himself about building something that lasted. Outside, the estate was quiet. Inside its walls, 40 students slept, dreaming their way toward futures that had seemed impossible 6 months ago. And in this room, in this bed, Ethan held someone he'd thought he'd lost forever and felt, for the first time in years, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was real and honest and fully chosen. And that was more than enough. Spring melted into summer with the kind of warmth that made everything feel possible. The foundation settled into its rhythm, students arriving for the second full residential session with excitement instead of trepidation. Word had spread about the program, and applications tripled. They had to turn away kids they wanted to accept, which hurt in a way Ethan hadn't anticipated. We need to expand, he said, looking at the rejection letters they'd have to send. We just expanded, Victoria pointed out. Not enough. There are hundreds of kids out there who need this. So we build more programs, partner with other organizations, franchise the model. Can we do that? I don't know, but we can try. They were in the study, papers spread everywhere, Maya doing summer reading in the corner while pretending not to listen to their planning sessions. It was late June, almost a full year since Richard Hale had died, and sometimes Ethan forgot that any of this had seemed impossible once. The conversation about marriage hadn't come up again since Maya's blunt question in April. They'd both been busy, and there was always something more urgent to deal with. But it lived between them, unspoken but present, like a question waiting for the right moment to be asked properly. That moment came on a Tuesday in early July. Ethan had been in the city all day, meeting with potential corporate sponsors. He came home exhausted, tie loosened, wanting nothing more than a quiet dinner and maybe a terrible movie with Victoria. Instead, he found the main hall filled with people. Students, staff, some families he recognized from past events. They were all gathered around something in the center of the room, but he couldn't see what. Maya spotted him first. Dad, finally, we've been waiting forever. Waiting for what? You'll see, come on. She dragged him through the crowd, and people parted to let them through. In the center of the hall stood Victoria, wearing a simple dress, looking nervous in a way he'd never seen her look nervous before. "What's going on?" Ethan asked. Victoria took a breath. "I had a whole speech planned. Very eloquent, very romantic. But I'm going to skip it because I'm terrified, and if I don't do this now, I'll lose my nerve." She dropped to one knee and Ethan's brain stopped working. "Ethan Cole, I loved you when we were too young to know what love meant. I lost you because someone else decided our story for us. And I found you again when I'd given up on finding anything real." Her voice was shaking slightly. "You've given me more than a second chance. You've given me a life I actually want to live, a purpose that matters, a family I didn't know I needed. And I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to be careful or practical or sensible. I just want to be yours. Officially, legally, forever. So will you marry me?" The hall was completely silent. 40 students, a dozen staff members, Maya with her phone out recording the whole thing, all waiting for his answer. Ethan realized he was crying. "You're asking me?" "Someone had to. You were taking too long. I was building up to it." "Were you?" "Eventually. Maybe. I don't know." He laughed, wiping his eyes. "Yes. Obviously, yes. How is that even a question?" Victoria stood up, grinning, and he kissed her in front of everyone. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. Students whistling and catcalling, Maya shouting, "Finally!" loud enough to be heard over everything. When they broke apart, Victoria was laughing and crying at the same time. "I can't believe I just did that. In front of everyone." Maya said it had to be public, that you'd say yes if there were witnesses. "Maya planned this?" "Maya planned everything. She's terrifying." His daughter appeared at his elbow, still filming. "I'm not terrifying. I'm efficient. There's a difference." "How long have you been planning this?" Ethan asked. "Since April, obviously." Maya stopped recording and looked at them both seriously. "You guys are good together. Like, actually good. Not just pretending or settling or whatever. And life's too short to wait around for perfect timing. Mom taught me that." "Buenos manches." Ethan pulled Maya into the hug with Victoria, the three of them standing there in the hall while people celebrated around them, and felt something settle deep in his chest. This was his family, chosen and complicated and imperfect and real. The engagement shifted something in the house. It was like everyone had been waiting for permission to acknowledge what they all already knew, that Ethan and Victoria were building something permanent. The students started referring to them as Mom and Dad behind their backs, which embarrassed Victoria until she realized she kind of liked it. Staff meetings felt more cohesive, decisions easier because there was no longer any question about whether this partnership would last. They set the wedding for October, partly because it was a beautiful month, and partly because the one-year anniversary of the foundation's first cohort graduation felt meaningful. Small ceremony, just family and close friends, and the students who'd become family too. No grand society wedding. No press, nothing that would make either of them uncomfortable. Planning it was harder than planning the foundation had been. "I don't care about flowers," Victoria said in late July, staring at sample books the wedding planner had brought. "You have to care a little, Shotyana," the planner insisted. "Why? They're just flowers. They'll die in 3 days." "They're for pictures, for memories." "So we'll remember dead flowers?" Ethan intervened before Victoria could fire the wedding planner. "How about we pick something simple and move on? Roses. Everyone likes roses." "Roses are boring," Maya said from her usual spot. "You're 12. You don't get a vote." "I'm almost 12 and a half, and I get a vote on everything. That's how democracy works." They compromised on wildflowers, which made the planner grimace but satisfied Victoria's need for something unpretentious. The cake was chocolate because Ethan hated fondant, and Victoria agreed it was pointless. The venue was the estate itself, ceremony in the garden where Victoria and Ethan had first really talked after her father's funeral. The only real fight came over the guest list. "We have to invite Bradley," Victoria said. "No, we don't. He's been supportive. He donated to the foundation. He's your ex-husband who was manipulated into marrying you by your father. This is weird, Victoria." "Everything about our situation is weird. This is just one more weird thing. I don't want him there." Victoria looked at him carefully. "Are you jealous?" "No. You sound jealous." "I'm not jealous. I just think having your ex-husband at our wedding is bizarre. He's my friend. Since when? Since he apologized and we both acknowledged that our marriage was a sham forced on us by my father. Since we started being honest with each other instead of playing roles. He's been good to me, Ethan. Good to the foundation. He deserves to be there if he wants to be. Ethan knew she was right, which made it more annoying. Fine, invite him, but I'm not making small talk. That's fair? Bradley arrived for the wedding with a date, which helped. She was a marine biologist named Kara, funny and sharp, and she and Victoria hit it off immediately. Bradley pulled Ethan aside during the rehearsal dinner. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said. I know. I just wanted to see her happy, really happy. And she is, so thank you. I didn't do anything. You did everything. You gave her permission to be herself instead of who she thought she had to be. That's not nothing. They shook hands, awkward but genuine, and Ethan felt the last bit of possessive weirdness dissolve. Bradley wasn't a threat. He was just another person trying to figure out how to be better than his past. The night before the wedding, Ethan couldn't sleep. He found himself in the study at 2 a.m, looking at the framed drawing Maya had made, the one of the 3 of them in front of the estate. It hung next to a photo from the foundation's opening. Students and staff clustered together, everyone smiling. Below that was the deed to the property, rewritten to establish the Hale Foundation as a permanent institution. And in the drawer, though he didn't need to look, were the 12 letters he'd written 20 years ago and Victoria's responses, written 2 decades too late, but perfect in their honesty. Can't sleep either? He turned. Victoria stood in the doorway in pajamas, her hair loose, looking more like 19 than 30. Just thinking, he said. About? How impossible this all seemed a year ago. You showing up at my door, your father's confession, all of it. If someone had told me then that we'd end up here, you wouldn't have believed them. Would you? Victoria came to stand beside him, looking at the same photos and documents. No, I would have thought it was too good to be true, that people like me don't get second chances. People like you? People who've spent their whole lives being controlled and manipulated and turned into something they're not. I thought that was just who I was. The good daughter, the obedient wife, the successful CEO who didn't actually enjoy any of it. She leaned against him. You showed me I could be something else. You did that yourself. We did it together. They stood there in comfortable silence, and Ethan thought about Sarah, about how she'd told him once that love wasn't about finding someone perfect, it was about finding someone whose imperfections fit with yours. He'd loved Sarah's practicality, her steadiness, the way she'd made him feel grounded when the world felt chaotic. And he loved Victoria's fire, her vulnerability hidden under armor, the way she challenged him to be braver than he thought he could be. Different loves, both real, both important. I'm scared, Victoria admitted quietly. Of what? That I'll mess this up. That I'll revert to who I was with my father, all control and performance and keeping people at arm's length. That I'll hurt you without meaning to. You won't. How do you know? Because you're aware of it. Because you're trying. That's all anyone can do. She turned to face him. Promise me something? Anything. If I start becoming my father, if you see me manipulating or controlling or treating people like chess pieces, call me on it. Don't let me get away with it just because you love me. I promise, but only if you promise the same thing. What would I call you on? Playing it too safe. Hiding behind being practical when I'm really just scared. Settling for contentment when I could have happiness. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss and then went to bed together, finally able to sleep with the weight of tomorrow hanging over them in the best possible way. The wedding was perfect in its imperfection. The weather cooperated, giving them a clear October day with just enough chill to feel like autumn. The wildflowers looked beautiful despite the planner's skepticism. The students helped set up chairs and hang lights, treating it like the community event it was. Maya was the maid of honor, serious and proud in her navy dress, making sure everything ran on schedule with the efficiency of someone 3 times her age. She walked down the aisle first, and Ethan had to swallow hard at how grown up she looked. Then Victoria appeared, and everything else disappeared. She wore a simple dress, ivory instead of white, with no veil or train or any of the traditional trappings. Just her, beautiful and nervous and smiling like she couldn't help it. Her father would have hated it. The informality, the location, the whole thing. That made it even better. They'd written their own vows. Victoria went first. "I'm not good at being vulnerable," she said, her voice carrying across the garden. "I spent most of my life building walls to keep people out. But you climbed over every single one without even trying. You saw me, really saw me, when I was barely visible to myself. And you loved me anyway. Not despite my broken pieces, but including them. I promise to keep letting you in, to keep trying to be brave enough to be honest, to build a life with you that's ours, not something inherited or expected or safe. I promise to love you, Ethan, messily, imperfectly, but completely." Ethan had planned something eloquent. He'd written it down, practiced it, but standing there looking at her, he forgot every word. "I loved you when we were 19, he said finally, speaking from his heart instead of his notes. "And I grieved you for 20 years without knowing I was allowed to. And I love you now, at 33, in a completely different way. You're not the girl I lost. You're the woman I found. And you're better. We're better. We survived things separately that we never should have had to survive. We made lives, raised kids, became people we can be proud of. And now we get to do it together. I promise to never take that for granted. To fight with you when we disagree, but never against you. To help you remember who you are when you forget. To be your partner in all of this. The foundation, the family, the mess and beauty of building something that lasts." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even Bradley was crying, which made Kara tease him mercilessly later. The ceremony was short, officiated by a judge who'd been mentored by Victoria's mother years ago. When they got to the kiss, the students cheered so loud that birds scattered from nearby trees. The reception was in the main hall, transformed with lights and music and tables full of food. Students and staff mixed with the handful of guests they'd invited, and it felt less like a formal event and more like a really good party. Ethan danced with Victoria, then with Maya, then with Keisha, who'd asked nervously if it would be weird. He danced with half the female students and several of the male ones too, and somewhere around 9 o'clock realized he was having the time of his life. Marcus cornered him near the dessert table. He was 18 now, about to start college, still working with the foundation as a junior mentor for newer students. "This is what you and Mrs. Cole, this is what you guys do, right?" he said. "What do you mean?" "Take broken things and make them better. The foundation, this house, your whole relationship. It was all kind of wrecked, and you just fixed it." "We didn't fix anything, Marcus. We just chose to build something new with the pieces we had." "Same thing, though, isn't it?" "Maybe it was. Maybe that was the whole point. You couldn't undo damage or erase the past. You could only decide what to build on top of it." Later, when the party had wound down and the students had been shooed off to bed by staff, Ethan and Victoria stood on the terrace looking out at the grounds. The lights were still up, casting everything in a warm glow. "We did it," Victoria said. "We did. I keep expecting something to go wrong." "Stop that. Let yourself be happy." "I'm working on it." Maya appeared with a blanket, wrapped it around both of them without asking, and settled on the bench nearby. "You guys did good today." "Thanks, kiddo." "Mom would have liked the wedding," Maya said, staring up at the stars. "It was weird and personal and kind of chaotic. She would have approved." "You think?" Ethan asked. "Yeah, she used to tell me that the best things in life are messy, that if everything's too perfect, you're probably faking something." Maya looked at them seriously. "You guys aren't faking anything. That's good." Victoria reached out and squeezed Maya's hand. "Thank you for everything, for planning the proposal, for being patient with me while I figured out how to be part of a family, for being awesome," Maya interrupted. "Yeah, I know. You're welcome." They laughed and sat there together under the October sky, three people who'd found each other through grief and manipulation and sheer stubbornness, now choosing each other every day. The foundation continued to grow. By the end of their first year of marriage, they'd expanded to serve 60 students and had partnered with 3 other organizations to replicate the model in different cities. The Hale name once associated with ruthless business practices and social climbing, became synonymous with educational opportunity and second chances. Keisha graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to State University. She chose to study social work, claiming she wanted to help other kids like her. Victoria cried at her graduation and tried to hide it. Marcus started a peer mentoring program within the foundation, connecting first-year students with those who'd been through the program. It became one of their most successful initiatives, proof that the best support often came from people who'd walked the same difficult paths. Maya turned 13 and became insufferable in the way teenagers do, but also more thoughtful. She volunteered with the Foundation's tutoring program, patient with students who struggled with math in a way that reminded Ethan of Sarah. She talked about her mom more freely now, sharing stories with Victoria without it feeling like a betrayal of either woman. "Do you think they would have liked each other?" Maya asked one night, apropos of nothing. "Who?" Ethan asked, though he knew. "Mom and Victoria." "I think they would have recognized each other," he said carefully. "They both loved fiercely and protected what mattered to them and didn't waste time on things that didn't. So yeah, I think they would have at least respected each other." "Good, because I like Victoria. Love her, actually, but I don't want it to mean I'm forgetting Mom." "You'll never forget your mom, and Victoria doesn't want you to. That's not how this works." "How does it work?" "I don't know, honestly, but I think love makes room. It doesn't replace, it just expands. You've got enough heart for both of them." On their first anniversary, Ethan and Victoria drove out to where the old apartment building had been. It had been torn down since, replaced by something modern and expensive, but they stood on the corner where it used to be anyway. "Right there," Ethan said, pointing. "Third floor, second window from the left. That's where you knocked on my door and changed everything." "I was so scared that night," Victoria admitted. "I almost didn't come. Almost convinced myself it was a terrible idea." "What made you do it?" "Maya, actually. I saw her through the window when I was standing in the hallway, trying to decide. And I thought about how my father's lies had stolen your chance to know you had this amazing daughter. How many other things he'd stolen from both of us. And I got angry enough to knock." "Remind me to thank Maya for existing." "I do. Every day." They were quiet for a moment, watching the city move around them. The foundation had an event later that evening, another cohort graduating, another group of kids heading off to futures that had seemed impossible before. But right now it was just them, standing on a street corner, remembering. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked. "The quiet life you had before? It was simpler." "Simpler isn't always better." "That's not an answer." Ethan thought about his small apartment, his predictable routine, the safety of a life without complications. It had been comfortable, but comfort without purpose was just existence, not living. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it. Any of it. Even the hard parts. Even the fights and the fear and the times I thought we'd never figure it out. Because we did. We built something real. We did. And your father would have hated every second of it." Victoria laughed, bright and genuine. "He really would have." The event that evening was bittersweet. 23 students graduating, heading to colleges across the country, leaving behind the place that had nurtured them. But new students would arrive in weeks, filling those empty rooms, starting their own journeys. During the ceremony, Ethan watched Victoria give the keynote speech and marveled at how far she'd come. This woman who'd shown up at his door barely holding herself together was now confident and passionate, speaking about educational equity and second chances and the responsibility of those with resources to share them. Afterward, during the reception, an older woman approached them. She was small and elegant, with Victoria's eyes. "Mom," Victoria said, clearly shocked, "I didn't know you were coming." "I wasn't sure I would." Victoria's mother looked around the estate. "I had to see for myself what you'd done with this place, what you'd done with Richard's legacy." "And?" He would have hated it." She smiled, and it was warm. "That's how I know you did it right." Victoria had mentioned her mother a few times, always carefully. She'd left Richard years before he died, moved to Europe, established her own life away from his control. They spoke occasionally, but weren't close. "This is Ethan," Victoria said. "My husband." "I know. I read the article." She shook his hand. "Thank you for loving my daughter. Not who Richard wanted her to be, but who she actually is. That's easy, Ethan said. Who she actually is pretty incredible. Yes, she is. Victoria's mother turned back to her daughter. I should have protected you from him. Should have taken you with me when I left. That's my biggest regret. You did what you could. I did what was easiest. There's a difference. She took Victoria's hands. But you've done better than I did. You've taken what he broke and rebuilt it into something beautiful. I'm proud of you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. After her mother left, promising to visit more often, Victoria found Ethan in the garden where they'd gotten married. That was unexpected, she said. Good unexpected? Yeah, really good. She sat on the bench and he joined her. I spent so long being angry at her for leaving me with him, for choosing her freedom over my safety. But seeing her tonight, I think I understand. She was just as controlled as I was. She did what she had to do to survive. Are you going to forgive her? I think I already have. Being angry is exhausting, and she's right. I did do better than she did. I broke the cycle instead of just escaping it. We broke it, Ethan corrected, together. They sat there as the evening turned to night, watching students and families celebrate, and Ethan thought about cycles and choices, about how easy it would have been to stay bitter, to let Richard's manipulation poison the rest of their lives, about how hard they'd worked to choose differently. 2 years into their marriage, the foundation received a letter that changed everything. It was from a woman named Patricia Chen, Marcus's mother. She'd been estranged from him for years, couldn't get her life together enough to be the parent he needed. But the foundation had kept her updated on his progress, and she'd been following his success from a distance. The letter was an apology and a request. She was sober now, working, trying to rebuild her life. Could she see him? Would the foundation help facilitate a meeting? Marcus's response was immediate and firm. No. You sure? Ethan asked. They were in the study, the letter between them. She left me. She chose drugs over me. Why would I want to see her? Maybe because she's trying to change, like you did, like all of us did. That's different, is it? Marcus was quiet for a long time. What if I forgive her and she just disappoints me again? Then you deal with it. But what if you don't forgive her and spend the rest of your life wondering what if? It took 3 months, but eventually Marcus agreed to meet his mother. They arranged it at the foundation, neutral territory, with staff nearby in case it went badly. Ethan and Victoria stayed out of sight, but close enough to intervene if needed. Through the window, they watched Marcus and Patricia sit stiffly across from each other, not speaking at first, then talking, then crying, then finally tentatively hugging. Do you think it'll work? Victoria asked. I don't know, but at least he'll know he tried. Is that enough? Sometimes trying is all we get. Marcus and his mother didn't have a fairy tale reconciliation. It was messy and complicated with setbacks and hard conversations and therapy sessions. But slowly, carefully, they built something new. Not the relationship they'd lost, but something different, something possible. Watching it happen, Ethan thought about his own father, dead for 15 years now. They'd had a complicated relationship, marked more by absence than presence. He'd never gotten closure there, never had the chance to ask why his dad had left, or whether he'd thought about coming back. But maybe closure was overrated. Maybe what mattered was what you built with the people who stayed. In their 3rd year of marriage, Victoria got pregnant. It wasn't planned. They'd talked about kids in abstract terms, but never seriously pursued it. Victoria was 33, Ethan was 35, and they'd both assumed their family was complete with Maya. The pregnancy terrified them both. I don't know how to do this, Victoria said, staring at the positive test. I barely know how to be a wife. Now I'm supposed to be a mother? You're already a mother to 40 students, Ethan pointed out. That's different. I can send them home at the end of the program. Technically, you could do that with a baby, too. It's just frowned upon. She threw a pillow at him, but she was almost smiling. Maya's reaction was pure excitement. I'm going to be a big sister. You're already a big sister to half the kids here, Ethan said. This is different. This is official. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Victoria had morning sickness that lasted all day. And by her second trimester, she was uncomfortable in a way that made her short-tempered and exhausted. The foundation's work continued, but she had to step back from some of the day-to-day operations, which frustrated her. "I'm useless, Chum," she complained in month 7, unable to tie her own shoes. "You're growing a human," Ethan countered. "That's the opposite of useless. I can't do anything. Can't travel, can't work late, can't even see my feet. How is this fair?" "It's not, but it's temporary. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who feels like a whale." Ethan wisely didn't respond to that. Their daughter was born in March, 3 weeks early, and screaming like she was angry at the world. They named her Sarah, after Ethan's first wife, with Victoria's mother's name as the middle name. Sarah Eleanor Cole. Holding her for the first time, Ethan felt everything and nothing all at once. Terror that he'd screw up this second chance at fatherhood. Joy that she existed. Grief for the Sarah who'd never meet her namesake. Love so overwhelming it physically hurt. "She's perfect," Victoria said, exhausted and radiant. "She's pretty angry. She gets that from me." Maya held her baby sister with the serious concentration of someone handling something precious and breakable. "Hi, Sarah. I'm Maya. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything." Over the next months, they adjusted to life with a newborn. The foundation continued running with Ethan taking on more of the day-to-day while Victoria recovered and bonded with Sarah. It wasn't seamless. There were sleepless nights and arguments over whose turn it was to change diapers and moments when they both wondered what they'd been thinking. But there were also perfect moments. Sarah's first smile. Maya singing to her sister. Victoria nursing at 3 in the morning, exhausted but peaceful. The 4 of them together, a family built from loss and second chances and sheer stubbornness. 5 years after that knock on the door in February, Ethan found himself back in the study, looking at everything they'd built. The foundation now served over 200 students across 4 locations. The original estate housed a permanent staff of 20, with students rotating through year-round programming. They'd established partnerships with a dozen universities offering guaranteed admission to foundation graduates. The Hale name meant something completely different than it had when Richard was alive. Maya was 17 now, getting ready to apply to colleges herself. She wanted to study education, maybe come back to work at the foundation someday. Sarah was 2.5, all energy and opinions, a perfect blend of Victoria's determination and Ethan's stubbornness. Victoria found him there, Sarah balanced on her hip. "Hiding?" she asked. "Reflecting. That's the same thing. Maybe." She sat beside him, and Sarah immediately climbed into Ethan's lap, examining his face with the intense scrutiny only toddlers could manage. "Daddy knows," she declared, poking it. "That's right. Daddy's nose. My nose. No, that's your nose. Daddy knows," she insisted, poking him again. "She's right, you know," Victoria said. "She has your nose. And your stubborn streak." "I'm not stubborn. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. It's one of the things I love about you." They sat there together, their daughter between them, and Ethan thought about the different kinds of love he'd experienced. The wild first love with Victoria when they were too young to know better. The steady, comfortable love with Sarah that had saved him when he needed saving. And this, the chosen love with Victoria, built on honesty and work and the decision to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. "I've been thinking," Victoria said. "Dangerous." "Shut up. I've been thinking about the foundation, about succession planning." "We're too young to be thinking about succession. We're not getting younger, and I want to make sure that if something happens to us, the foundation continues, that it doesn't fall apart because we didn't plan." "What did you have in mind?" "A board, real governance, not just us making every decision. Bring in Marcus, Keisha, some of the other graduates. Give them real power. Make this bigger than just our project. You want to give away control? I want to share it. There's a difference." She looked at him seriously. "My father held on to everything so tight he couldn't see he was strangling it. I don't want to make the same mistake. So we build something that outlasts us." "Exactly." They implemented the changes over the next year, established a formal board with former students in leadership positions, created endowments to ensure financial sustainability, developed systems and processes so the foundation could run without them at the center of everything. It was harder than Ethan expected, letting go, but also freeing. On what would have been Richard Hale's 78th birthday, they held a ceremony renaming the foundation. It became the Second Chances Educational Foundation, with the Hale name relegated to a small plaque acknowledging the original funding source. He would have hated this even more than the rest of it, Victoria said, looking at the new sign. Good, Ethan replied. Because that was the thing about breaking cycles and building new things. Sometimes the best way to honor the past was to make sure it stayed in the past, to take what was broken and build something better. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and honest and fully chosen. The foundation's 10th anniversary fell on a Saturday in October, the same month they'd gotten married. They held a celebration on the grounds, with hundreds of current and former students, staff, donors, partners, a decade of work, thousands of lives changed, a model being replicated across the country. During the speeches, Marcus took the microphone. He was 26 now, working as a school counselor, married to a teacher he'd met in college. He'd come a long way from the scared kid who'd run away. 10 years ago, I didn't think I had a future, he said. I was nobody from nowhere, and I couldn't see past next week, let alone next year. Then Ethan and Victoria saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. They didn't just give me an opportunity, they gave me permission to believe I deserved one. And that changed everything. He paused, looking at them directly. This foundation isn't just about education or money or opportunity, though it's all of those things. It's about the radical idea that people deserve second chances, that your past doesn't have to define your future, that love and work and stubbornness can build something that lasts. So thank you for building this, for believing in us, for showing us that broken things can be remade into something beautiful. The applause was deafening. Ethan looked at Victoria and saw tears streaming down her face. Happy tears, the kind she'd learned to allow herself. That evening, after the celebration wound down and the guests departed, their family gathered on the terrace. Maya, home from her first semester of college. Sarah, now 7, and reading at a level that amazed her teachers. Ethan and Victoria, gray starting to creep into their hair, lines forming around their eyes, but still together. Tell the story, Sarah demanded. She'd heard it 100 times but never got tired of it. Which story? Ethan asked, though he knew. How you and Mama fell in love twice. So Victoria told it, about being 19 and reckless, and certain love could survive anything, about being separated by lies and manipulation, about finding each other again when they'd both given up hope, about choosing to build something new from the broken pieces. Sarah listened with rapt attention, even though she knew every word. Maya smiled at the familiar story, probably thinking about her own future relationships and whether love could really survive that much. And the moral of the story? Victoria asked Sarah, their ritual. That love is stronger than lies, Sarah recited, and that people can change if they want to, and that families come in all shapes and sizes. Good. What else? That Grandpa Richard was mean, but you fixed what he broke. We didn't fix it, Victoria corrected gently. We built something new. There's a difference. As the evening darkened and stars emerged, Ethan thought about how true that was. They hadn't fixed anything, hadn't erased Richard's manipulation or undone 20 lost years, hadn't brought Sarah back or made Victoria's childhood less lonely or erased any of their scars. They just decided those scars didn't have to be the end of the story, that you could acknowledge damage without being defined by it, that love, messy, complicated, imperfect love, could create something stronger than manipulation or control or fear ever could. The foundation would continue. Their daughters would grow up knowing they could be anything. Students would keep arriving, scared and hopeful, and leave confident and capable. The cycle would continue, not because it was perfect, but because they'd built something that mattered. And at the center of it all was a simple truth they'd learned the hard way, that the best things in life aren't the ones that come easy. They're the ones you fight for, work for, choose over and over again even when it's hard. 20 years after their first love ended in manipulation and lies, Ethan and Victoria had built a second love on truth and choice. It wasn't the fairy tale version where everything worked out perfectly. It was better. It was real. And real, they'd learned, was always better than perfect.